concurrence where we have a joint hearing with the Senate Committees on Veteran Affairs and the Senate Armed Services Committee. I want to give special thanks to Chairman Reed, Ranking Members Moran and Wicker for making this hearing happen. This is a critically important topic. It's a topic that we've been talking about since I came to this body, and that's been a number of years back. And it's about the yearly transition of 200,000 service members from being a warrior to a civilian, and the tools that we provide these men and women during that process that impacts everything from financial to medical to emotional well-being. Today I want to hear how the DOD, the VA, and the DOL are working together to ensure that this impact is a positive one. In partnership with your agencies, we've made some strides to improve the transition process, but we're far from where we need to be. In partnership, though they're important, I want to make sure during this hearing that you guys are talking to one another and that we understand what's going on with the folks who are retiring out of the military. Look, we've got enhanced GI Bill benefits, programs like Skill Bridge. We've got DOD and state governments that are working to streamline requirements to get service members everything from commercial driver's license to a number of other opportunities that are in the private sector that they've learned those skills in the military. There's still too much red tape out there, and we need to work to undo that. We've enacted the PACT Act, which has been a huge success, the largest expansion of VA healthcare and benefits in a decade, and I might add, necessarily so. We've improved veterans' access to mental health through the Hannon Act and the Strong Act, but recent data shows that we're not where we need to be when it comes to veterans' mental health. We need to get more of these veterans into the system so they don't fall through the cracks, and that transition process is an opportunity to happen. And in fact, we've got some people on this rostrum today that have some ideas on how to make that transition from DOD to the VA system smoother. I'm looking for our first panel to provide government perspective on what's working and what's not. I'm looking for our second panel, composed of veterans and advocates, to provide their personal perspectives on what's working and what's not. They will also advocate for various policies. Do we make sure we're doing right by our service members? I want to read you some statistics before I turn it over to my fellow chairman, Jack Reed. These are DOD data on enlisted deaths. 89% of active duty deaths by suicide were among enlisted service members. Enlisted service members. Across the active and reserve component, those who died by suicide were primarily enlisted male under the age of 30. These are data points we need to take into consideration. If this population is struggling with their mental health while in the service, those struggles are likely to continue and get worse as they make the transition to civilian life. And that is why this hearing today is so important. With that, I turn it over to Senator Reed.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tester. It is a privilege to share the dais with you this morning. I'm glad we brought our committees together to discuss such a very important issue. I'd like to welcome and thank our witnesses for joining us today. Our military's greatest asset is the people, the men and women who serve. Our men and women in uniform have long provided America with the strongest national defense in the world, and the leaders in this room have a fundamental duty to ensure that they are set up for success both in and out of the service. The military is a challenging profession, and we know that our service members have sacrificed much for the nation. We also know that the overwhelming majority of veterans report positive experiences in the military. Through surveys and data, we know that American veterans are more civically engaged, earn more money, and have more education than those who have not served. Veteran unemployment is lower than non-veteran unemployment across the country and across nearly every demographic. Their economic outlook and quality of life is, on average, higher than non-veterans Americans. In short, military service is a social good. It benefits the nation, and it benefits those who serve. Transitioning from military service to civilian life can be challenging, however. The Department of Defense, in conjunction with the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Labor, prepares service members and their families for this transition primarily through a structured training program known as the Transition Assistance Program, or TAP. TAP provides information, resources, and tools to service members and their families to help prepare for the move from military life to civilian life. Service members are required to begin TAP a year before separating from military service, and those who are retiring can begin TAP up to 2 years in advance of their anticipated retirement date. I've been encouraged by the overall success of TAP, but there are opportunities for improvement that we will discuss today. In particular, recent Government Accountability Office reports have highlighted the challenge in getting full participation in the program among service members. Although 90% of transitioning service members do eventually participate in TAP, up to 70% did not enroll in TAP a year in advance of their separation as required by law. I understand the Department of Defense is working to implement the GAO's recommendations and would ask our witnesses for an update on those efforts. A number of professional transition programs have shown great promise. For example, the SkillBridge internship program allows service members in the final months of their military career to work full-time at a private employer to gain experience and knowledge about the civilian workforce. Similarly, the United States Military Apprenticeship Program provides active duty military members with professional skills training and the opportunity to earn nationally recognized certificates while finishing their military careers. And I would like to know what lessons can be drawn from these programs and applied to other efforts. Finally, the transition from the military medical system, TRICARE, to the VA healthcare system can be daunting and confusing. Although VA eligibility and implementation should be smooth, many service members experience delays in determining their disability ratings, which can cause uncertainty and financial stress. Swift implementation of healthcare programs will be key to improving transition of members from active service to civilian life, and would ask our witnesses to share their views on how the transition can be streamlined. Thank you again to our witnesses, and I look forward to your testimonies. Now, on behalf of Chairman Testa, I'd like to recognize Ranking Member Moran.
Senator Reed, Chairman Reed, thank you very much. Thank you to you and our chairman and veterans, and Senator Wicker for joining us. And thank you for our witnesses for being here. Our committee and the Department of Defense, Veterans Affairs, and Labor should prioritize a seamless transition and provide resources to reduce unemployment, homelessness, and suicide. All issues our committee deals with on an ongoing basis, and it seems like they all come together at this moment when we talk about transition. But we can address unemployment, homelessness, and suicide, as well as bolster military recruitment and support success after the military if we can improve the transition from active duty to prior service. Success after service will look different for every service member. That is why we must make certain that veterans are equipped with the knowledge and resources they need to thrive. That knowledge and resource needs to come earlier than the day in which they leave active service. I also want to address the friction. I'd like to see you all address the friction that exists in the transition process between military retention and readiness, something hugely important to our military, but to our nation and its national security. We need to allow service members to attend pre-separation counseling, TAP classes, apprenticeships, and internships before separation. FY 2019 NDAA, Congress reformed TAP, put additional requirements on the departments to individualize the transition process for those who are at higher risk for unemployment or post-transition issues. Additionally, Congress required that each service member go through TAP at least once more than 365 days prior to separation, a mandate that we know is not being followed for at least 70% of transitioning service members, according to the Government Accountability Office. Since those reforms were made in 2018, GAO has issued 12 reports on transition. Those reports include nearly 40 recommendations to VA and DOD. It's my understanding that very few of those recommendations have been agreed to or implemented, and DOD has not implemented a single one. Given these facts, I worry that there's a lack of understanding from commanders about the importance of prioritizing a positive transition and allowing service members time to prepare for the next phases and their families' phase in their lives. I understand the importance of operational readiness. However, if a service member has a positive transition experience and receives support from their command and peers as they leave the military, they are more likely to have a positive view of their military experience, a successful transition, and assist with the recruitment by encouraging others to join the military. I'm grateful to each one of our witnesses for being here today. In the second panel, we will be joined by a Kansan, who I want to express my gratitude for his presence here, Dr. Arthur DeGroat, Lieutenant Colonel retired. He is from the Kansas State University Military Affairs and Innovation Center, and he has become a significant component of our witness panels as we deal with transition. So, Dr. DeGroat, thank you for joining us, and I assume I should turn to Senator Reed.
Thank you, Senator Moran. On behalf of Chairman Testa, let me recognize the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Wicker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'm glad to be here today joining with three of my distinguished colleagues. I'm particularly proud that I share the leadership role on the Armed Services Committee with a fellow veteran, Senator Jack Reed. His career in the military is far more distinguished than mine, but I'm proud to be a veteran, proud to have served, and proud to be here with three very distinguished supporters of our military and our veteran community. There are improvements that need to be made in our veteran experience and in our transition experience. But the truth is that the vast majority of our veterans are highly successful in their post-military careers and personal lives. And I do appreciate Chairman Reed making that point and making the very positive point about military service during the active duty time and as a veteran. As our economy struggles with inflation and rising interest rates, the reporting from the U.S. Census Bureau shows that veterans and their families have consistently achieved higher standards of living than non-veterans. This is over the past 40 years. The veteran unemployment rate is lower than the non-veteran employment rate. Both can be improved, but that is a significant statistic. This has been true nearly every month since January 2003, when the Bureau of Labor Statistics began tracking this information. This impressive fact is no surprise to those of us who understand how valuable veterans are to civilian employers. Between 2005 and 2015, a recent study from the University of Akron found that military veterans earned higher average wages than non-veterans. These facts demonstrate what those of us in the military community have known for years. Most veterans are doing well. The skills and character we developed during our time in service lead to desirable outcomes. Our witnesses should be congratulated for the superb work that they and their departments have been doing in this area over the past decades. The success of our veterans shows that joining the military is a great way to improve career and life prospects. This is true regardless of sex, race, or national origin. As I have said, and echoing others, the United States military is the greatest civil rights program in the history of the world. The success of veterans from minority communities proves this. Researchers studied households headed by racial or ethnic minorities with low education experience. In that study, researchers found that households headed by veterans had significantly higher standards of living than those headed by non-veterans. And in 2017, the median annual incomes of Black and Hispanic veteran households were more than $20,000 higher than those of minority non-veteran households. So as you could see, I'm not only proud to be a veteran, I value military service and encourage many young Americans to follow this type of service. We've also learned that effective pre-separation transition programs are helping to prepare service members for life after their military careers. The programs set these veterans up for civilian life, and their communities notice their success. In particular, young Americans see that military service can have very positive effects. This helps recruiting efforts. In this way, these transition programs act as a force multiplier. The Transition Assistance Program has been operating for just over 30 years, but it has a lot to show from that relatively brief tenure. Today, it supports around 200,000 service members every year. Congress has capitalized on that momentum. We've identified the success of these transition programs and expanded these opportunities. The FY 2019 National Defense Authorization Act required broad reforms to make the Transition Assistance Program even stronger. Today, we'll find out if we can improve on that. Congress must keep faith with our veterans through these initiatives, which I will continue to support. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses today about their efforts to execute these transition programs. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Wicker, for your statement and for your service. Thank you very much. Now, let me welcome the first panel. From the Department of Defense, we have the Honorable Ashish Vazirani, Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness. From the Department of Veterans Affairs, we have the Honorable Joshua Jacobs, Undersecretary for Benefits, accompanied by John Bosler, Chief Veterans Experience Officer. From the Department of Labor, we have the Honorable James Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training. And from the Government Accountability Office, we have Mr. John Sawyer, Director of Education, Workforce, and Income Security. Mr. Vazirani, please begin with your opening statement.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Moran, Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the committees.
If you could pull the microphone as close as possible, sir.
I appreciate the opportunity to address this joint hearing today, not just as the Acting Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, but as an advocate for and a champion of service members and their families at all stages of their service, inclusive of transition. I'm honored to be in the company of my colleagues from the Department of Veterans Affairs and Labor, both of whom are integral partners in our collaborative and coordinated mission to facilitate the transition from military to civilian life, as well as a representative from the GAO, which provides thoughtful evaluations. A service member's transition begins on day one of service, and it is our duty to ensure a successful service member is a successful veteran. Members of the military and their families repeatedly prove their dedication, courage, and selflessness in protecting our nation. In return, our value proposition is to provide them with the support, services, and resources they need to thrive beyond the battlefield. President Biden said, "The only truly sacred obligation we have is to prepare and equip those women and men we send into harm's way and care for them and their families when they return home." Service members are better prepared for their transition to civilian life today than at any other point. This reflects Secretary Austin's steadfast commitment to take care of our people. This commitment extends beyond their separation from duty in either the active or reserve component. DOD is one of the 7 agencies that each play a crucial role in the governance of military to civilian transition. Our investments in our service members' training and education, financial readiness, and health and well-being, coupled with the whole of government efforts to support their transition, are proving effective. Veterans using the post-9/11 GI Bill are more likely to graduate and have a higher GPA. Veterans are 20% more likely to be homeowners. Veterans earn more than their civilian counterparts on average, and veterans enrolled with the VA have better health outcomes than their civilian counterparts. The Joint Executive Committee stands as the bedrock of our collaborative efforts, and I have the privilege of serving as the DOD co-chair. The JEC provides the framework through which our agencies jointly oversee this transition process. The Transition Assistance Program Executive Council, a subordinate committee of the JEC, co-chaired by VA, Labor, and DOD, is responsible for ensuring that we have met statutory requirements and continuously improve the transition process for future service members and their families. DOD, with the collaboration and coordination of our interagency partners, is supporting service members in their transition to civilian life with a human-centered design approach. Our lines of effort are too numerous to name them all here, but we have made great strides in mental health support services, career advancement and educational resources, transitioning spouse employment assistance, and homelessness prevention, just to name a few. Our interagency team knows our work is ongoing. We are wholeheartedly committed to continuous improvement of the transition process and our transition assistance program. We appreciate the legislative authorities that Congress provides to support transitioning service members and improve transition processes and programs. We continue to use those authorities with our interagency partners. In closing, I'm proud of the holistic transition framework that delivers individualized support for service members and their families through our interagency partnership. With your continued support, we will uphold our promise to take care of our people, securing their future and ensuring the continued success of the all-volunteer force. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary, and I'm now going to recognize the next person, if I can find my notes. I think we can recognize Mr. Jacobs. Thank you, Senator Wicker. Mr. Jacobs.
Thank you very much, and good morning, Chairman Tester, Chairman Reed, Ranking Members Moran and Wicker, as well as members of the distinguished committee. I appreciate the opportunity to appear before you to discuss VA's efforts to support service members as they transition from military to civilian life. I'm accompanied by VA's Chief Veteran Experience Officer, John Bursler, and I'm pleased to join our partners from DOD, DOL, GAO, as well as our VSO partners on the second panel. Each year, approximately 200,000 service members transition from military to civilian life. For many, transition is an opportunity to take on new challenges and build the next chapter in their lives. For others, this time can be daunting and filled with a mix of emotions and uncertainties. It's our duty to care for all types of veterans, regardless of where they are in this journey. We need to connect them with their earned benefits and health care because veterans who utilize their earned benefits are healthier, they earn more, and they're better set up for success as they enter into civilian life. Not only that, we know that our success or failure in connecting veterans with their benefits has lasting impacts on the military's ability to recruit future generations of service members. To empower transitioning service members in their journey towards a fulfilling civilian life, service members are allowed to begin their transition assistance program 1 year prior to separation or 2 years prior to retiring. Attending TAP as early as possible in the transition process is critical for transitioning service members, given the vast amount of information they need to digest in a compressed time frame. It also gives them the opportunity to access their earned VA benefits more quickly through the Benefits Delivery at Discharge program, or to get their foot in the door to a potential employer through the Skill Bridge program. As part of the broader interagency TAP program, VA delivers a 1-day TAP course, which was attended by 88% of all VOW Act eligible transitioning service members in fiscal year 22. VA's TAP course is a valuable resource that provides guidance on how to access earned VA benefits and enroll in VA healthcare. And participation in TAP is correlated with a higher application rate for VA benefits. Additionally, VA also contacts all eligible veterans at 3 key stages during their first year after separation from active duty through a program called Solid Start, which was established in 2019. As of September 30th, Solid Start has assisted nearly 400,000 veterans with accessing their earned benefits. Despite these successes, too many recently separated veterans aren't accessing VA's most high-impact services within the first year after they separate from active duty, including health care and compensation benefits. Part of the reason for this may be that veterans under 40, and especially those under 30, don't consider VA an immediate need, but they should. To tackle that challenge, VA, in partnership with all military service branches, as well as our federal partners, including DOD and DOL, are using the voice of veterans and their families to identify pain points and co-design solutions through extensive human-centered design research conducted over the last 2 years. Some of those pain points were echoed recently when Sergeant First Class Rima Rusnak began her transition journey and started visualizing her life in a different capacity, a life geared more towards academics. For Rima, it was only 2 years ago that transition came on the radar. She has many goals for life after service, but for the first time in her career, she didn't know what actions to take. While still in uniform, she began studying to get her master's degree with the ultimate goal of obtaining her doctorate. She needed to know whether she'd be financially secure during school, but she wasn't sure what the GI Bill would cover or when she could even utilize it. Rima is also a paratrooper. Every jump takes a toll, no matter how well you execute the parachute landing fall. While knee and back pain from jumping out of airplanes is tolerable at this point, she expects it to become more of a challenge later in life. She was fortunate enough to attend TAP in February, and she applied for her benefits through BDD. She left active duty in August and received her first disability compensation payment in September. And as she begins this next chapter in her life, she's going to continue her service to this country through the Army Reserves. Stories like Rima's are why we're actively co-designing solutions that address pain points and demonstrate tangible value to veterans. It's why we began hosting annual veteran transition symposiums to coordinate and improve the way that we support transitioning service members and their families. It's why we're updating the TAP curriculum so accredited VSOs and state departments of Veterans Affairs will now have the opportunity to directly engage with transitioning service members and their families for nearly an hour at the end of every one-day VA TAP class. And it's why the cross-agency team co-designed and is prototyping with service members, veterans, and their families a personalized digital solution that enables them to set goals, take action, and get help when they get stuck. We're also working to engage more with service members during their military career by collaborating with DOD to educate commanders on the importance of connecting service members and spouses with VA benefits and health care prior to separation. And as I stated earlier, improving the experience during that process. The military to civilian transition process brings opportunities for us to improve trust in VA and support the personal growth of veterans as they navigate this challenging but ultimately rewarding phase of their lives. Thank you for your continued support of transitioning service members, veterans, caregivers, and their survivors. I would be happy to answer any questions you or the committee members may have.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for your testimony. Next up, we have from the Department of Labor, Honorable James Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary of Labor for Veterans Employment and Training. You have the floor, James.
Chairman Tester, Chairman Reed, Ranking Member Moran, and Ranking Member Wicker, and distinguished members of the Veterans Affairs and Armed Services Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today on the current state of the Transition Assistance Program and the steps that should be made to continue modernizing and reforming the program. I've spent my entire federal career serving veterans. This is my passion and that of my team who carry out our mission every day across the entire country. DOL is the federal lead for employment and training programs. Within DOL, VET's mission is to prepare America's veterans, service members, and military spouses for meaningful careers, provide them with employment resources and expertise, protect their employment rights, and promote their employment opportunities. VETS administers employment programs for transitioning service members as part of TAP. Successful employment is the key to economic success and can strongly impact physical and mental health, life expectancy, and the quality of life. Our American Job Centers are one-stop locations that offer a broad range of career and supportive services to the public. And veterans receive priority of service for all DOL-funded training programs. That's why it's so critical that DOL Vets is at the table today and that we continue to have a seat at the table with our federal partners and to ensure the success of transitioning service members and veterans in the future. Today, I'd like to highlight 4 topics that will interest this committee. First, service members are attending DOL TAP employment workshops in record-breaking numbers. VETS administers 3 core TAP employment workshops: the 1-day Employment Fundamentals of Career Transition workshop, the 2-day DOL employment workshop, and the 2-day Career and Credentialing Exploration workshop. In FY 2022, we provided instruction to over 266,000 participants, which is over a 40% increase from the previous workshop record in FY 2021. And our participant survey results are very encouraging. In FY 2023, 97% of participants indicated they would use what they learned in their own transition planning, and 95% reported that their confidence in transition planning was enhanced. Second, VETS is leading the way to transform the TAP employment space. Via the VETS Employer Outreach Program, VETS is also asking U.S. employers to participate in the DOD Skill Bridge program. Last year, employers provided 22,548 employment-related DOD Skill Bridge opportunities to serve members across all services. And in response to consistent feedback that service members want more personalized support beyond the classroom environment, VETS created the Employment Navigator and Partnership Pilot, or EMPP. Since its launch in 2021 at 13 military installations, EMPP has served about 13,000 participants, and preliminary data shows that EMPP participants earn higher wages than those who did not participate in EMPP. Third, VETS pilot programs are a huge success. For example, as of March 31st, 2023, 96% of EMP survey respondents reported positive feelings after meeting with their employment navigator and would recommend EMPP to a friend or colleague. Additionally, 98% felt EMPP partners met or exceeded their employment-related expectations. And our off-base transition training pilot provides veterans and their spouses workshops modeled after our TAP curriculum at locations across the active duty military installations in areas with high veteran unemployment in 10 pilot states so that they can get additional post-separation assistance when they need it. Fourth, VETS will leverage data to improve TAP outcomes. Traditionally, VETS has only had access to data about TAP workshops and those workshop participants. However, new initiatives such as EMPP have enabled VETS to access employment outcome information on our transitioning service members through the National Directory of New Hires at the Department of Health and Human Services. DOL will leverage this information to improve program delivery and employment outcomes. And we look forward to sharing the outcomes of our research with our partners and stakeholders in the future. In conclusion, our long-term strategic goal for TAP is for the nation to recognize military service as a path to high-quality civilian careers. The future of the country's all-volunteer force across the armed services depends on this recognition. And we look forward to working with the committees to ensure all veterans can secure a good job that will provide them with career advancement opportunities. Thank you again for the invitation to participate in this hearing with my colleagues from VA, DOD, and the GAO, and I welcome your questions.
Yeah, thank you for your testimony, Mr. Rodriguez. Next up from the Government Accountability Office, we've got John Sawyer, Director of Education, Workforce, and Income Security.
Chairman Reed and Tester, ranking members, Wicker and Moran, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to discuss GAO's recent work on programs that help service members transition from military service to civilian life. Over the next few years, more than 500,000 service members are expected to take this critical step. There are several federal programs that provide benefits and services to help service members achieve their educational, employment, and other goals and overcome potential challenges in adjusting to civilian life. Today, I would like to highlight our work on DOD's credentialing program that helps service members obtain civilian credentials related to their military skills and training, DOD's Transition Assistance Program, which provides tailored counseling and classes to help service members achieve their post-transition goals, and VA's Solid Start Program, which serves new veterans in their first year after leaving military service. Our work has found that oversight and implementation of these programs could be enhanced to achieve their intended benefits. Since February 2022, we have issued 10 recommendations on these programs. I am pleased to report that VA implemented our Solid Start recommendation to further collaborate with veteran service organizations to identify and address outreach gaps for hard-to-reach veterans. As a result, VA increased its rate of successful outreach to younger veterans and continues to regularly coordinate with VSOs to enhance its overall outreach. The remaining recommendations were directed at DOD and its service branches. For example, we found that DOD's credentialing programs lacked adequate evidence to show that the programs were working. As a result, we recommended the DOD more fully assess the effectiveness of its credentialing programs. DOD agreed and expects to implement this recommendation in fiscal year 2025. The remaining recommendations were issued in our December 22 report on DOD's Transition Assistance Program. In that report, we found that attendance in tailored two-day classes increased significantly since 2016. However, the service branches waived over half of its transitioning service members from attending them. Per service branch policies, service members who need maximum transition support must attend a two-day class, but we found that nearly a quarter of them did not. And finally, we found that most transitioning service members, 70%, did not start TAP at least 1 year in advance, as generally required. While the service branches and the TAP Policy Office collect and review performance information on two-day class attendance and timeliness, they do not fully leverage this information to understand and improve results. We believe that better understanding root causes for attendance and timeliness results would help DOD improve service members' ability to benefit from the full range of transition resources available to them. Effectively addressing the outstanding recommendations would help DOD reasonably assure that every service member who leaves the military receives the best possible chance to succeed as they transition back to civilian life. This concludes my oral statement. I would be happy to respond to any questions.
Thank you for your statement. Thank the whole panel for the statement. There's two panels today. I would ask the members on the rostrum, we'll get 4 minutes to ask questions, so get your good questions up and so we don't run over, because otherwise this will be an incredibly long hearing. Not that it shouldn't be, because it's important. I'm going to start my questions with you, Mr. Sawyer, since you're warmed up. In your review of the transition process, did you identify, you talked about they didn't start many of them didn't start the transition 1 year in advance. Did you identify the reasons why?
Thank you for that question, Chairman Tester. In our report, we did not specifically identify reasons why individuals were not starting the Transition Assistance Program 1 year, at least 1 year in advance of their anticipated separation or transition date. But what we did find is that there is information available to DOD to allow them to assess the results. And that is why we recommended that they identify the root causes to try to understand.
So we'll go to you, Mr. Vizirani. How does the DOD hold commanders, or does it hold commanders accountable for providing service members the need for transition, the time they need for transition?
Senator, thank you. The DOD is holding or observing and watching what the commanders are doing. And so we do that through collecting data on the Transition Assistance Program. We have compliance measures and timeliness measures. We measure compliance across 8 domains, and we measure timeliness, whether the service member starts 365 days in advance.
And what are you seeing with those measurements?
What we're seeing is, as reported, that about 30% are starting on time. We know that we have to make improvements there. We're providing that data to the services. And one of the things that we're also doing is at the assessment at the end of TAP, understanding if there are barriers to that timeliness. And what we're finding is that those barriers tend to be in the area of 3 categories: involuntary separations, which are happening within that 365-day time period, mission requirements, and then also personal decisions.
So you're in a tough position because everybody on this roster knows that the military needs every person they can get and keep every person that they have available to them. So I think the last thing you want to talk about is transitioning folks out of the military. But I think it is important that this is a group effort. That's why everybody's here today. We've got you representing the DOD. We've got Jacobs representing the VA. We've got the folks on this panel that give us the full gamut. We have got a massive problem that has been around for a long time in mental health with the folks that are coming out. And the statistics that I read in my opening statement show that this is really most prevalent in enlisted members. So do you have, before I move on, just real quickly, Mr. Verzano, do you have any ideas on how we can make it better while keeping our numbers up in the military?
Senator, so as the Secretary said, mental health is health, and we're very focused on assessing the mental health of service members and ensuring their mental health throughout their time of service. Through the congressionally mandated suicide prevention
Yes.
response, we're implementing a program looking across and implementing a public health approach, ensuring that we're fostering a supportive environment, that we're addressing stigma, that we're improving the delivery of behavioral health care, and that we're revising suicide prevention training so that commanders and first-line leaders understand the signs of where a service member may be have concerns about their mental health or behavioral health.
Thank you. I'll go to Chairman Reed and then Ranking Member Rand.
Thank you very much, Chairman Tester. Quickly, Mr. Vizarani, what steps are you taking to get compliance with the statutory 365-day sign-up? There are some circumstances which you can't, i.e. someone is terminated from duty prior to that time period. But what are you doing specifically?
Senator, one of the things that we're doing is we're in the process of integrating a single data repository that will allow for that measurement and providing that information back to the military services and to commanders. And when we think about the accountability portion of this, we try and think about this not accountability necessarily from a punitive standpoint, but from what can we learn? Are we understanding best practices, and are we sharing those best practices across the services?
Well, thank you. One of my experiences is that the transition from uniform to civilian, DOD to VA, the most challenging aspect is medical health care. I recall going up to Walter Reed in 2000, visiting and finding people who were there for 6 or 7 months trying to get their VA eligibility or disability status to a level that meets the military level. And the other issue, just the first step, have we successfully combined electronic medical records between the VA and the Department of Defense yet?
Senator, the Department of Defense has completed our deployment of the electronic health record within CONUS, with the exception of the Lovell Center in Chicago. And we're working with our partners at the VA to implement that. We're taking all of the lessons we've learned through the CONUS implementation and applying that to ensure that we have a successful implementation at Lovell.
But we're not operational yet, are we?
We are not operational between the two systems. However, we do have visibility. So there is a sharing of information between DOD and VA. So while the electronic health record is not operational, there is a sharing of information to coordinate that care and ensure continuity of care.
Well, I would encourage you, I mean, this is slightly off topic, but not entirely. I would expedite that. It's been going on now for a decade or more, and that would, I think, help smooth out the transition dramatically. What are the primary choke points, Mr. Jacobs and Secretary, between VA in terms of health care? I understand that VA does a separate independent disability assessment, is that true? That differs from the Department of Defense?
We have a joint program called IDES when a service member when they have a condition that impedes further service, where we can do a joint disability process. But for anyone applying for VA disability compensation, that's a separate and distinct approach. And the benefits that we provide in terms of disability compensation are not only a recognition of the impact of the individual's service, but they're also a gateway to other benefits. They impact healthcare eligibility and the criteria, the priority group within healthcare. It also can inform eligibility for other benefits and make connections.
But the reality is that a DOD physician could give someone an 80% disability rating, the VA would independently rate?
We are providing independent assessments based on our rating schedule for disability compensation purposes.
I think that's something that deserves further coordination and maybe even legislative support. I think that would be helpful. I thank you. I know this is a very challenging situation, but the other point too is, I presume, and I'm exceeding my time, just very quickly, there is a mandatory information session on medical health care opportunities that's specifically designed for the retiring veteran?
Yeah, so in the one-day VA TAP course that we provide, we include information about healthcare in addition to the full suite of other benefits.
Thank you.
Ranking Member Moran.
Chairman, thank you. Secretary Vizirani, both of my colleagues who preceded me in asking questions have highlighted the need for, in I think, our view that the Department of Defense further emphasize, act more expeditiously. Would you confirm to me that you understand and support the value of this transition program for the benefit of the servicemen and women who serve today and the veterans they will be tomorrow? And tell me what the impediment in the Department of Defense and the branches is toward moving more expeditiously to meet the requirements of the statute.
Senator, I do confirm our commitment to taking care of people and ensuring that service members make a successful transition so that they have a successful as a veteran as well. We are working with the military departments and services to make sure that they have the information available about the starting of TAP and the completion of TAP, providing that information, creating dashboards that the commanders have available to them and their leaders have available to them so that we have a clear understanding of if there are any barriers to TAP and addressing those barriers.
What, if any, is the pushback or the lack of enthusiasm for complying with the law by those you are informing?
Sir, we have not heard any pushback regarding compliance with the law. I think the one thing that we do is we trust our commanders to ensure that they're balancing the readiness of their unit with the needs of the individual. The one thing that we do understand and we've been taking advantage of is this full year to plan for transition so that the service member has time to customize that approach for their expectations and for their needs.
Mr. Sawyer, you highlighted in your testimony and in response to Senator Tester about the data, including the lack of two-day attendance and the two-day attendance is being waived. What is the plan at GAO to try to push the services to take the statutory mandate seriously and decrease the utilization of their waiver authority?
Thank you for that question, sir. Now, in our report, we did not direct any recommendations towards the waivers. We did notice that for some 53% of those that were transitioning, that waivers were granted. We're not sure why that occurred. Our scope did not allow us to investigate that. However, we did see that in Tier 3, those that are designated as having the greatest risk of a successful transition, that some 22% of those did not take the class at all. And that is why we recommended that spend some time, DOD should spend some time evaluating the root causes. Is it commander support? Is it the culture change? Is it mission requirements? But what are the reasons that are driving
Is the
this?
timing of your recommendations and the response to your recommendations such that we should see further progress at the DOD or the VA or the Department of Labor in response to your recommendations? Or is this the kind of course of business at the moment?
Well, to answer that question, based on our follow-up and discussions that we have had with DOD and VA, they are moving towards addressing these recommendations and issues that we have.
So GAO feels comfortable with the progress that those two departments are making? All right, let me ask you this question. Should I feel comfortable with the progress that these two departments are making?
I think you should feel comfortable with the progress. However, we have recommendations, and we are going to monitor the corrective actions because this recommendation that's dealing with identifying root causes is a tough recommendation that you really have to go below this surface and really try to identify reasons why these timeliness and attendance results are such that they are.
Mr. Sawyer, if I don't reach out to you, would you reach out to me with any concerns that you have in the recommendations being followed?
Absolutely, sir.
Thank you, sir.
In lieu of Ranking Member Wicker, Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Vazirani, within the TAP, how much leeway is given to individual TAP offices to teach the curriculum so they can tailor it to their needs? For example, if you have a service member who's going to sign up again, but that doesn't show in their records yet, they still have to attend the week-long class. Is that correct?
Senator, if I can clarify your question, if a service member has gone through TAP, transitioned, and then come back into service, is that the question? I'm sorry.
If they are still in the service, but with the requirements and the timeline that's there, they have to start the process. But yet their records haven't kept up with their intentions that they plan to re-enlist, for example. Are the programs given any kind of flexibility there to be able to tailor it to certain instances?
Senator, the program is designed to tailor to each individual. Each individual goes through an individual assessment. They are tiered. They then have a separation counseling to help them understand which elements of the TAP program will be beneficial for them. At the end of the program, there's also a capstone, which the commander will sign off on completion. If during that time period the service member decides they want to stay in service, then there would not be a need to complete the program.
Okay. Do you think you have the program appropriately staffed to handle the current number of military personnel?
Senator, we do believe we have the current level of staffing correct. I think as we continue to learn more about the program, we'll continue to evolve that and determine whether or not additional authorizations are required to fulfill the program. But at this point, we do believe that we have the right staffing.
We've seen a GAO study from December of 2022, and it found that nearly 25% of service members who needed that maximum support didn't attend the mandatory two-day class. So what steps do you see the department needs to take, or are you taking now, that would address that?
Senator, we are taking steps to get a better understanding of why service members are electing not to participate. There are service members who want, as I indicated earlier, the personal decisions why they wouldn't, so we're trying to get a better understanding of that. We're also ensuring that...
What specifically are you doing?
So through the TAP assessment, we're digging into that and understanding those barriers. And then the other thing, through the commander's capstone, getting a better understanding of why that service member would not want to participate in that program.
And Senator Fisher, if I might add, one of the things that we're doing is we're recognizing that TAP is a commander's program. We're creating a visual management tool so that commanders have greater visibility of their transitioning service members. It's work that Mr. Bursler is leading through a human design element. We're prototyping that tool, and if it's appropriate, I'd love for him to share a little bit about
That would be great. When you say you're prototyping it, do you have a pilot program in place? Are you using it?
Yes, Senator. We're currently actually testing it this week with command teams. So this can not only include the commanders themselves, but the senior enlisted personnel that are supporting the commander's decisions. And it will give them much greater visibility, as Mr. Jacobs mentioned, to actually see which units that they oversee are in compliance with the 12-month or 24-month requirements. This is a decision that's been co-designed from all of our agencies, plus a few more, including all 6 service branches, and it has been taken through our governance process. So it's underway, and it should be available next year.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Hassan.
Sir, and I'm materials. So I all veterans to get involved and take the pledge to connect with 10 veterans, family members, or caretakers. Really help build that sense of community that's so important. Now I'll start with a question to you, Mr. Vazirani. Senator Kramer and I, as you know, worked together last year to pass into law the Solid Start Act, which requires the VA to call each veteran 3 times within their first year of separating from the military to make sure that they know about and understand the VA benefits that are available to them. In your written testimony, you referred to the year before separation and the year after separation as the critical transition period. The Solid Start program helps with the second half of that critical transition period. How can we provide a similarly tailored approach to service members in the first half of that transition period as they prepare to separate from the military, to help them plan for and work towards their long-term goals post-military service, including for future careers? And I hope you were able to hear that. Apparently there was some difficulty with this microphone.
Senator, thank you for that question. I was able to hear the question. I appreciate it. As I indicated and I said earlier, we certainly believe that mental health is health. And throughout the service members' cycle of service, we do have checks on their mental health. During that 365 days in the transition time period, we've worked with our interagency partners in developing an enterprise individual assessment, and that covers 9 different domains. And as we look at those, that's how we understand how to tailor the program, the transition assistance program for that service member.
Well, thank you. And I just hope that that includes some real outreach similar to what we're trying to accomplish in Solid Start, so that everything doesn't rest with the service member to initiate
Senator,
transition services.
It does, and in that, if a service member has had, through that mental health assessment or an interaction with behavioral mental health, they are referred to the in-transition program, which helps them to understand what services would be available and help that transition.
I understand that, and my time is short, so I will follow up with you, but it's not just about mental health, right? I mean, there are other things that veterans need, and they need outreach for. So let's move to one other quick question, because I continually hear how service members feel unprepared to transition into their new careers or move to new places because they don't have connections with local community, something New Hampshire is proactively trying to deal with. So, for example, James Roberg of Antrim, New Hampshire, shared with my office his experience working for the New Hampshire Department of Military Affairs and Veteran Services. This state office has developed a variety of resources to help transitioning service members and veterans, including a resource book full of available state and local resources. Like many other transitioning service members, James had no idea that there was a state office like this in New Hampshire, and yet he eventually ended up working there and to this day continues to help educate other service members on employment opportunities in the state. In New Hampshire, we've worked to help address this gap in knowledge because we value veterans in our community and recognize their contributions to our workforce. So I would ask that you guys respond to this in writing because I'm running out of time, but I am very interested in how we can ensure that more service members get directly connected to state and local resources that can provide meaningful connections with the communities that the veteran plans to reside in before the veteran makes that transition. Thank you all so much for your work.
There will be a number of questions to the record, and I would hope that you all answer them in a timely manner. Senator Scott?
Thank you, Chairman. First off, I want to thank each of you for being here. Thank you for caring about our servicemen and women and their families, and thank you for what you try to do every day. I could just give you a couple of experiences I had. I was in the Navy and got out. Do you think anybody before talked to me about what I was going to do afterwards? You think anybody ever called me afterwards? Nobody, ever. Never, nobody ever. In 2011, I became governor of Florida. And right after I won the election, I welcomed some National Guard members back from overseas, and 30% unemployment. Now, unemployment was bad at the time, but 30% unemployment, and their experiences, nobody was talking to them about how to get a job. So we put a lot of effort in our state, into one, making sure people could get a job, and then a variety of other issues. We also had a state agency that just did veteran affairs. And the thing that surprised me the most, there was no coordination with the federal government. I mean, like none. They wouldn't give us any information on who was getting out. And so, I mean, there's a big opportunity to help our families. And so my goal as governor was to make Florida the place where you wanted to serve. And number two is make the place where you wanted to retire. So, and we did a variety of things. And I've been up here 5 years, and I'm really proud of the things that the Armed Services Committee has done. The 2019 NDA established programs for counseling pathways, for self-assessments, for individualized initial counseling, tier assignments that reflect the servicemen members' transition preparedness, revised curriculum, and improvement to the transition assistance program. There's a lot of, I think this Armed Services Committee has done a lot of good things. But we're here, you know, in my state, there's a lot of news from our veteran services organizations and also from the GAO report in 2022 that indicates it's not working the way it should. And I know we had a meeting yesterday, and you're absolutely committed to getting this done. So, but the GAO said that 90% of transition troops participated, but 1/4 did not even attend the mandatory 2-day class. So there has to be a lot of things to make that happen. Florida's home to, we got 21 military bases, 3 unified commands. I always think it's the best place to serve, but I think there's a lot of opportunities that we have to make it better. So here, let me get to my questions. And you know, we did everything we could. We waived every fee for spouses. Probably one of the biggest things we did was parents that had a child in the Medicaid need to have a Medicaid waiver. They go to the bottom of the list mostly, and we changed it to they went to the top of the list. That changed people's lives a lot. So can any of you talk to me about how you work with your state counterparts? Because I assume most states have what I had. There's a state agency, and how do you work with them now?
Yeah, thank you, Senator, for that question. And I have to say, you have an excellent veteran leader and advocate in Hammer Hartzell, who is the lead of the State Department of Veterans Affairs in Florida.
Yeah.
It seems like every time we have an engagement, he is there. We actively work with all of the state departments of Veterans Affairs through the NASVA program. And one of the things that we're doing through the upgrade to our VA TAP curriculum is we're including at the end of our day for the last 45 to 60 minutes a portion of the day where accredited VSOs and state departments of Veterans Affairs can directly engage with transitioning service members, because we know that personal relationship is important. That when veterans go home, they're provided with 200 pages of material on VA benefits and healthcare alone. There are a lot of questions, and they have incredible advocates in both accredited VSOs and state and local government who are there and whose sole purpose is to help connect them to those earned benefits. So we actively work with them. We actively seek input and feedback on our programs. I get feedback from Hammer personally when something's not going well, or he wants to say, hey, you know, your staff did a great job, you should recognize them. And so it's a really important part of our operating model, and they're really valued partners.
Thanks. Thanks for what you guys are doing.
Senator Shaheen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being here. I want to make sure I understand some of the testimony earlier with respect to the TAP program. Mr. Rodriguez, I understand you to say that vets are attending TAP in record numbers. Was that correct?
Yes, it is. I'm talking about the DOL version of TAP, that one-day TAP course.
Okay, so that's a different TAP course than?
Well, it's a single day that's separate from the DOD and the Veterans Affairs days.
And how do you coordinate with what DOD is doing?
So we work seamlessly together as part of, it was mentioned, the TAP Executive Committee, the Joint Executive Committee. We work together to ensure that TAP is a seamless transfer of information and sharing of resources to better prepare that service member when they are preparing to transition out of the military.
So if I'm a service member, can I go to the DOL TAP rather than DOD TAP?
It's the same TAP. So there's 3 mandatory days, 1 day DOD, 1 day Department of Veterans Affairs, 1 day DOL, and then there's 2 additional optional days that a service member can take.
So what percentage are actually attending DOL's TAP?
I don't have the percentage, Senator, but I can tell you the numbers. Roughly 148,560 service members are going through the 1 day DOL TAP.
But I understood you to say, Mr. Sawyer, that 70% of members of the military who are getting out didn't attend? Are you talking about a different program?
Thank you. The 70% relates to those starting the program at least 1 year in advance of their transition date.
I can understand why veterans might be confused because the coordination is challenging. And as we heard from virtually all the chair and ranking members talked about the mental health challenges and the number of veterans who are at risk of suicide. And is it Borsler? I understand that you've worked with our European allies about how they administer their transition assistance programs. Do veterans, non-U.S. veterans, face the same risk of suicide in their first year as U.S. veterans?
Senator, I'd have to take that question for the record because we don't, to understand their methodologies and how they measure that rate. But I do know that there are some great programs that our allies use as well as our own. I think we still have the best system.
And so when you talk about those great programs, are there things that we should be adopting from what our allies are doing?
I do think that as I mentioned, Senator, we do have the best system when we compare to a lot of our allies in the way that they execute these programs. There are some interesting use cases, particularly in the United Kingdom and their career transition partnership. But in the intervening years, as Assistant Secretary Rodriguez mentioned, the ENPP program for the Department of Labor almost mirrors what the United Kingdom has been doing. It's been very successful. So I think there's a lot we can learn from each other.
I appreciate that. Mr. Jacobs, one of the things that we're hearing in New Hampshire is that too many veterans are not taking advantage of the VA benefits, particularly for mental health. It's the theme that everybody's referenced in all of the questions. So what can we do better?
Thank you very much for that question. We know that when veterans connect and access their earned benefits, whether it's disability compensation, home loans, education, or their VA health care, they have better health outcomes, they have better economic opportunities, and it decreases the risk for suicide.
Right. So how do we do that?
Correct. So we are aggressively continuing to do more outreach. So during the transition period, we're identifying where there are veterans, transitioning service members at risk, and providing a warm handover. We have benefits counselors, we have military service coordinators, there are VHA liaisons on military treatment facilities. Part of the way that we're doing that is through the Solid Start program, where we're calling transitioning service members 3 times in the first year after they leave the military at the 90, 180, and 365-day marks. And the goal of this program when it was created was to address the very real mental health concerns that we are all focused on. And the program is structured in a way where it's open-ended. So it's really tailored around responding to the veterans' needs. Do they need connection with a mental health counselor? And then we can connect them to a vet center, a CBOC, a medical center. Do they need a status update on their claim? Do they need assistance with their claim? Do they need help pursuing housing? And so we have opportunities like that, but it's also to the point that was made earlier, it's Buddy Check Week. It's promoting opportunities for us, not only as a government, but as a broader society to support one another, to know the signs to look out for, so that when we see a fellow veteran, a friend in crisis, that you know that there's a place to help them, even if you don't have the resources to do it yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Schmidt?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here and the work that you do every day, helping the folks that have served us in Missouri. We're really proud. We've got 3 bases. We've got Whiteman Air Force Base, we've got Fort Leonard Wood, and we've got Rosecrans, which is the Air National Guard base in Northwest Missouri. And so those folks that have committed themselves to this country, they deserve all the support and the best support, which is why we're all here. So thank you for that. I wanted to ask just 2 questions, and I'll just throw it out, whoever wants to answer. The first is, Senator Ossoff and I co-sponsored a bill that would support military spouses as they are being reassigned to ease some of the regulatory burdens that exist as they're moving from place to place. What are just 1 or 2 things that we can do better to ease that sort of burden as they're, you know, they want to continue their careers or business ventures as they're moving from place to place.
Senator, if I may, I'll start. First of all, thank you very much for the work that you've done to support military spouse employment. The one thing that we're finding is really effective for military spouses is the compacts and encouraging the states to sign on to compacts. That portability not only benefits a spouse of an active duty service member, it supports spouses of veterans, it supports all Americans. And so the more that we can get states to sign on to those compacts, I think we'll find that we'll have greater portability.
Thank you. I don't know if anybody else had anything to add.
Senator, I'll add a
Okay,
few
sure.
things there. One of the biggest challenges is our military spouses are at a 31% unemployment rate. And so they have the highest unemployment rate of any category affiliated with the military community. So we need to figure out a way to protect military spouses' employment when they are transferring duty station to duty station, or if their spouse is Guard and Reserve and they're called to active duty and that spouse has to take time away to take care of their families or whatever things that come as part of life when someone is active duty or called to active duty. So I think there's ways to protect military spouses, to give them the courage to identify as military spouses and and encourage employers to actually employ these military spouses and help retain that spousal employment when someone is called to active duty.
And I'll add, at the risk of being a bit parochial, we're actively looking to hire military spouses at VA. We know they're incredible mission-oriented teammates that need sometimes additional flexibility to enable them to continue to support our mission while moving in partnership with their spouse. And so we're actively working to do that from a VA perspective as well.
I'm sure this is probably true for other centers, but I know that as I get around Missouri and talk to employers, they're looking for skilled people. That the labor shortage obviously is a broad issue, but as it relates to military folks, and this question's been asked in a few different ways, but you know, it's the United States Senate. Just because a question's been asked, it doesn't mean it's been asked by everybody. Your sort of take on what are a couple of things that we can do better to make sure that that you know our military servicemen and women, while they're in active duty, can avail themselves to as much of that training as possible as they transition, because there is a great need out there, and I know that a lot of employers are really looking for people who've served the country as well. What are just a couple of takeaways that we can take back home and work on?
Senator, I'll start on that. As we think about the opportunities for the service member and the military spouse to gain employment or to be successful as they go beyond, I think encouraging employers to get involved in the programs that we have, whether it's SkillBridge or our military spouse employment program, those would be helpful. I think the other thing, sir, that would be really helpful is if we can encourage more Americans to talk about the value of service and the benefits and how successful veterans are, and that will help us on the front end as well as we encourage people to come into service.
I would just briefly add, you know, one of the things I heard when I joined Hiring Our Heroes in a community event with the health and life sciences industry is that oftentimes companies will have incredible veteran candidates. They may not have a position that they can offer them, but they think it's a valuable resource. And so it's making kind of that connective tissue a little bit stronger so that they've got colleagues in industry who they can refer those incredible candidates to, even if they can't offer a position at that time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for having this hearing. Thank you all for being here. There is no question that our service members deserve a seamless transition out of the military to VA services. In my home state of Washington, DOD went live with its own electronic health records program back in 2017. It has its own challenges, and I'm sure you all know that when the VA rolled out its EHR program, it was not working the way that it should have, and patient safety has been a very big concern. So I want to make sure that DOD is working hand in hand with VA so that we can truly have a seamless electronic health record system that is available across both agencies to serve service members and veterans alike. Mr. Vazzarini, I wanted to ask you, can you share some of the lessons DOD has learned while you rolled out your EHR system, and how did you earn back the trust with providers and service members after you had significant periods of system downtime?
Senator, thank you for that. As we've rolled out our EHR, the things that we learned, and particularly through that first time period, the things that we, the barriers that we had in utilization, we've learned about what we need to do from a usability standpoint to make the EHR more usable for the healthcare provider. We've learned about the training that we need to conduct to ensure that there's a quick ramp up on utilization. And those are some of the things and some of the lessons that we've learned that we shared with our VA partners.
Okay, I appreciate that. I wanted to ask you about women service members because transitioning out of the military is a challenging experience for all service members, but it is particularly difficult for women who face additional barriers in the civilian world, everything from gender pay caps to sexual harassment, lack of access to childcare. And there was a study by Syracuse University that 54% of women veterans who left the service didn't feel prepared to navigate the resources available to them in their local communities. That's compared to 35% of male veterans. Mr. Vazzarini, has DOD tailored the Transition Assistance Program at all for women service members?
Senator, we have. And so one of the things that we do through that transition process, and particularly in that understanding of what benefits are available and the care, we've tailored particularly the education around health benefits and how to access health benefits for women. The other thing that we continue to do is focusing on all veterans, but particularly for women, is to understand for those who may have come across or encountered something along the spectrum of harm, the resources available to them there. So I'll turn to maybe Mr. Jacobson. He could talk about what VA would.
Yeah. Senator, we have what's called the Women's Health Transition Training Program, which provides tailored support and information for transitioning service members. It includes gender-specific health care information as well as information about how to access benefits in a timely way. What I would say is it is underutilized. So we're working to try to get the word out and promote and encourage more transitioning service members to take it because we do think it's a valuable resource.
Okay, thank you. And one last question. In last year's Military Family Support Programming Survey, 80% of the respondents said their finances were a major source of stress, and more than half of military and veteran families reported experiencing barriers to savings over the previous 2 years. 22% of currently serving military families, 38% of veterans families have less than $500 or no emergency savings at all. I think financial literacy is critically important, and Mr. Vazzarini, in my few seconds that I have left, what is DOD doing right now to promote financial literacy and making sure that that is an integral part of the Transition Assistance Program?
Senator, one of the things we do is from the very outset, from the time a service member starts in boot camp, is making sure they understand what financial readiness resources are available to them. We provide education and training and coaching and access to personal financial counselors throughout their time in service.
Okay, and if I can get a more detailed response from you, I would really appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yep, Senator Cotton.
Mr. Vazzarini, I've heard reports that former U.S. service members have been approached by communist China and offered jobs that draw on their military expertise to aid the PLA. This is already happening with some of our European partners, veterans, oftentimes through professional military companies in third world countries like South Africa. What steps, if any, is the Department of Defense taking today during the transition process to ensure that our troops are aware of this kind of activity and adequately prepared to resist these offers, especially if done through intermediaries?
Senator, we continue to be concerned about the pacing threat of China and the approach that they take to try and undermine what we're doing. We have provided guidance through the military departments on when our service members there's outreach from malactors. And Senator, I'll be happy to get back to you with the specific steps we've taken and the guidance we've provided.
Yeah, could you please get back to me in writing on those steps and also what mechanisms, if any, you have in place to track these kind of offers? Because I do think it's a growing concern, like I said, with our European partners. But I worry about reports that it's now occurring in the United States as well. I believe that our reserves play a crucial role in the nation's defense by allowing the U.S. to retain critical skills and talents in our services while also allowing active duty service members to transition into the reserves. Unfortunately, like the rest of the active duty military, the reserves are facing historic shortfalls as well. Has the DOD studied barriers to transitioning into the reserves from the active duty?
Senator, that is, as far as addressing barriers to transitioning to the reserve, we are looking at that. We want to ensure that we, particularly as we continue to rely on the reserve component, one of the things that we've been doing, we brought on our first Chief Talent Management Officer. An area that we're looking at is permeability between the active and the reserve component, and providing that opportunity for service members to move from one to the other, active to reserve, but also the opportunity to come back into the active component.
Okay. In the studies, has the DOD identified any specific issues that create challenges for transitioning troops who may have gone in the reserves but decided not to?
Senator, if I can take that for the record, and I'll get back to you with
You may.
specific findings.
One final and related question. Obviously, we want to make sure that every man and woman who wears the country's uniform and wants to leave the service is set up for success in civilian life or in the reserves if they choose to go there. But I'm also curious about barriers to remaining, I shouldn't say barriers, drivers to transition when troops may have stayed on active duty. So as you're studying the challenges that they have in the transition process, have you also studied the main issues that are driving their desire to separate in the first place?
Senator, one of the things that we are seeing now is we're seeing actually record levels of retention.
Yeah.
And so we're benefiting from that, and that's certainly helping us in end strength. When one of the areas that we've talked about during this panel that is a driver for service members to get out is military spouse employment, and the opportunity for a service member's military spouse to also have a successful career and also contribute to the family's financial readiness. So that's an area that we're working very hard on to ensure that military spouses have career opportunities to support their service member, particularly as we look at our model, which typically requires the service member to move every 2 to 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
Senator Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to our witnesses here today. Thank you for your work in this area, and I think we can all agree that it's critical that our veterans have the support that they need as they transition into civilian life, which is why it's been a priority of mine to introduce legislation that was signed into law to help veterans who may have been wrongly given a less than honorable discharge from the military as a result of PTSD and TBI that was simply not diagnosed. They exhibited behaviors that led to a less than honorable discharge, and yet those behaviors were a result of PTSD and traumatic brain injury. That's why my bill, which was signed into law in 2016, allows for service members who have been diagnosed with PTSD or TBI or other related conditions in connection with their service in the military. They can more easily petition to upgrade their status. We know whether a veteran is entitled to VA benefits depends largely on the discharge status that's assigned to them, and VA benefits play an absolutely critical role in the successful transition to civilian life. It remains a key priority of mine that the discharge review boards continue to take these types of mental traumas into account when they're reviewing these petitions. And to that end, this year's NDAA included a provision that I authored calling on the GAO to complete a review of the Discharge Review Board's implementation of the legislation. But in order for veterans to access their newly earned benefits through an upgrade, they first need to be made aware of the opportunity to petition, as they're suffering from the trauma of PTSD and other mental traumas, they don't need to do that in silence. They can seek out help, but they need to be aware that it exists. So under Secretary Vazarny and under Secretary Jacobs, could you each describe what your agencies are doing to ensure those leaving or have already left military service are aware of the opportunities to petition a discharge review board for an upgrade? And my second question to each of you is, are there opportunities or additional ways to communicate this option, perhaps through the Transition Assistance Program? Whoever would like to go first.
Senator, first of all, I appreciate the efforts that you've made to ensure that service members and veterans receive the benefits that they're entitled to. We I've been working with the military departments to ensure that service members who've been discharged and want to seek a change or a correction to their record or a characterization of discharge are aware of those vehicles. Each military department maintains their own website that provides information about the discharge review process and the boards of correction. We in PNR also maintain a site, and then we work jointly with DOD, with VA to maintain a website that outlines and has an online tool that will take an individual through the different steps based on questions of what they're trying to change and how to get to the right resource. And so we're working with the VA on that. And at that point, I'll turn to Mr. Jacobs.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Senator, thanks for your leadership on this issue. We know that veterans with an OTH discharge may be at higher risk for adverse outcomes. So we're actively working to increase our engagement and outreach. Thanks in large part to Mr. Bursler, who's worked to create a journey map leveraging human-centered design to understand where the pain points and the opportunities are for us. And so we're using those insights. We've had a couple of symposiums with the interagency where we can look at the full life cycle, but also with veterans who have OTH discharges to understand where there are challenges and where we can make improvements. And finally, what I would say is we're working on a regulation. We've issued draft regulations. We're hoping to finalize that might address some of these issues.
Well, I look forward to continuing to work with you.
Senator, if I may.
Yeah, please.
One of the things you asked, the second question was what are we doing? What else will we do?
Right,
And so-
proactive.
yes, proactively. And so what we're doing is we are creating resources through our Military OneSource program to tape webinars that will outline the steps that a service member would take. We're also developing a learning tool online that service members, and those will be resources that service members will be exposed to during the TAP process.
Good, great. Thank you. Did you have
And
a-
Senator, I'd just like to add that VA Solid Start, our outbound call program, contacts every single veteran regardless of discharge type to ensure that they're equipped with the resources they need.
Good, great. Thank you.
Senator Ernst.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all of our witnesses who are here today for your testimony. We all know, and as you will witness from a lot of the comments today, that leaving the service is very complex and it can be complicated at times. And I do believe we all need to do our best for our country's best, and that means supporting all transitioning service members to be successful. Many years ago, when I was a young woman, I actually was part of the Army Career and Alumni Program, the old ACAP program, and worked at the Job Assistance Center. So one of my roles was educating members that were leaving the service on job employment, how to write resumes, fill out job applications. So I truly appreciated and enjoyed the time that I had at Fort Benning working with those service members that were separating, but I know that there is a lot more that we need to do. So part of this, beyond all the employment assistance, part of it is mental health education, resource education. And so, Mr. Vazirani, the first year after discharge is always, I think, the most difficult for those transitioning members, and it comes with that increased risk of suicide. I know my colleague, Senator Hassan, had mentioned the Buddy Check program. I was glad to partner with her on that effort. But getting transitioning service members connected to the post-service benefits and resources they need as quickly as possible really has the potential to lower the risk of suicide. So to what extent does the Transition Assistance Program provide service members other resources, again, beyond the employment and beyond education resources? We want to focus on those resources specifically for mental health. What does that provide?
Senator, so through the Transition Assistance Program, and we do also want to ensure that the service member has a successful transition. And so through that assessment process, as we look across those different domains, we try and understand where a service member may be at risk, whether it's at risk of homelessness, whether it's at risk because of mental health issues, whether it's risk because of spouse employment. So we try and tailor the program to that service member. I think another area that we've worked very closely through the Joint Executive Council and in our interagency partnership is the benefits at discharge. And we've made that process electronic, where we're sharing information with the VA now A service member now can make that application for benefits between the 180 days and 90 days in advance of separation, so that when they separate, they will have that benefit statement and they'll get that payment early on. And so that's an area that we've been collaborating with the VA, and I'll turn to Mr. Jacobs.
Certainly.
And Senator, I have the participant guide that all transitioning service members get when they attend the VA one-day TAP class. That includes an overview that transitioning service members actually write and try to tailor to their particular needs. It includes opportunities for follow-up. We also have benefits advisors where we can make that warm handoff, and other staff who are there to help with some of the more personal questions that they may not feel comfortable asking in a broader group.
Okay, well, I truly appreciate that, because I know back when I was working in that area, there was a lot of work to be done, but I appreciate you closing up that gap. One of the other areas is, of course, on help with filing disability claims. I could go on and on, but is there a way that those VA contract employees who are teaching that VA curriculum at TAP, are they allowed legally to assist with VA claims? And what would be some resources or ways that we could assist there?
Yeah, no, thanks. One of the ways that we're working to provide more assistance to help with the filing of claims is through the upgrades to our TAP 6.0 curriculum, which is going to launch in January. And through that change, we're going to add at the end of every day between 45 and 60 minutes for accredited VSOs as well as State Departments of Veterans Affairs to come in and speak directly to transitioning service members and their families. And that's important for a couple of reasons. One is to the point that you just said, there's a lot of information. We're compressing 200 pages into a day. And so there are going to be follow-up questions, and those VSOs and State Departments of VA can help in the following days, weeks, and months, either directly or through a warm handoff to us. Two is there's a growing risk of predatory actors trying to target veterans to get their earned benefits. They're charging money for things that our incredible VSO partners, the accredited VSO partners, and their state and the state governments are doing for free and very well. And so by creating that touch point at the end of every TAP class that VA offers, we're creating that warm connection and helping build relationships that hopefully can be helpful later on.
I thank you. And to our chairs, thank you so much for the time today. And thank you to our witnesses.
Senator Kelly is deferred to Senator Sinema.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Senator Kelly. Thank you for holding this hearing today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. This is an exciting chance to unify our active duty priorities and VA priorities to address important concerns to strengthen the process all service members go through when transitioning to civilian life. Arizona has 5 active duty military bases and over 20,000 service members that will someday, we hope, join the almost 500,000 veterans already living in Arizona. We're proud that so many veterans call our state home and want Arizona to continue to be an attractive place to settle in civilian life. When transitioning out of military service, it's not enough just to have resources out there, but our veterans need to be made aware of all the programs that exist. The Transition Assistance Program is often criticized for being too brief and not giving veterans time to retain the information provided. When losing the group safety net of the military, our veterans need to be set up to pursue a fulfilling career after their service. Arizona veterans tell me that while the military has given them an invaluable skill set, it can be difficult to transfer those skills into the civilian workforce without career guidance from people that understand their unique circumstances. So my first question is about the Sergeant Daniel Somers Veteran Network of Support legislation. We were proud to pass that into law. In fact, Congress had to pass it twice, once each for the DOD and for the VA. Together, these bills established a program where transitioning service members identify loved ones who will receive updates from the DOD and VA respectively to help them be better informed during the transition process. Can you provide me with an update on our pilot from the law I wrote and any lessons that we've learned from the process?
So, Senator, thank you for that legislation and giving us the opportunity to connect to those family members. I will have to get back to you with, for the record, on the results of the pilot to this stage.
And I would just add, personally, I know my wife helps make sure that I get to my annual physical, that I do all the things, and I know that's a big source of support for many transitioning service members, particularly given the breadth, the depth, the scope of the information that's being provided. So continuing to encourage spouses is really important to attend, but we're also mindful that sometimes they just can't make it during the day, or while they're actually still in uniform. So some of the off-base training that DOL provides is also a really great resource, and then continuing to follow up in the first year after they transition to try to connect those dots as well.
Well, thank you. I'd like to follow up with each of the departments on more detailed information about the success or challenges that the pilot's experiencing. As mentioned in previous testimony, transition from the military can take a lifetime. In last Congress, we passed my bill, the Reduce Unemployment for Veterans of All Ages Act. That lifted the arbitrary 12-year time limit on VA's vocational rehab and employment, or VRE program, for veterans with service-connected disabilities. Can you provide an update on the VRE program, specifically any details on how it's being used by older generations of veterans?
Yep, Senator, I'd have to get back to you for the record with more details, but what I would say is we've seen an increased demand for VRE services, particularly in the aftermath of the PACT Act. It's one of our most impactful programs that we provide, tailored to the individual needs, and it helps many more veterans as they're figuring out how to transition in their career goals. And so I'd be happy to follow up with you or your staff in addition to in writing.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Another benefit for transitioning service members is the Skill Bridge program, which has a great deal of support from industry partners at home in Arizona. But once service members become aware of this program, it's often too late for them to participate. How can you better spread awareness and encourage participation?
Senator, thank you. We also believe that the Skill Bridge program is a very effective program. One of the things that we're doing is in the transition counseling process is making sure that the service members are aware of Skill Bridge as a transition program. We're also ensuring that commanders are aware of the benefits of the program to ensuring the success of the transition of that service member, so they get those experiences working with companies or nonprofits or state agencies in order to put their skills to use and understand how they may be able to apply those when they do transition to becoming a civilian.
Thank you, Chairman.
Back to back, Arizona, Senator Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Chairman Reed, as well, and Ranking Member Wicker and Ranking Member Moran, for holding this very critical joint hearing on the military to civilian transition. As a Navy veteran myself, I know how critical and how crucial support of our nation's service members and their families is to ensuring their continued success after their service to our country. An Army survey of young adults aged 18 to 28 found that nearly 21% believe that joining the military, and this surprised me, joining the military puts their lives on hold. This perception could not be further from the truth. I'm a veteran who took my time in service in the U.S. Navy, started with training to be a pilot, and then I was a combat pilot. And then after that, I earned a master's degree in engineering, and then went to school to become a test pilot, did that job for a while, and later had the opportunity to serve at NASA as an astronaut. It wasn't putting my life on hold. We need to be sharing the message about the incredible honor it is to serve. And but also that it's a great job because of the challenges, because of the travel, benefits, the teamwork, the camaraderie, but also the focus on a mission and how great it is to have the opportunity to serve your country. And we need to do that work by providing support for our service members as they transition, as well as into their transition from military to civilian life. So thank you to all the witnesses for being here and for your work to support the success of our nation's service members and veterans and their families. And I know that a successful transition often requires a lot of time, and it requires planning, and it requires conversations with family. Service members need support to think about professional development from an early point in their military careers, whether that development will occur in their service to our country or whether it will be later in civilian life. And by beginning these conversations early on, we are setting our service members and military families up for success. So I commend DOD for significantly increasing participation in DOD's Transition Assistance Program. And I know that DOD can do better and can do better early on. So Secretary Vazarian and Mr. Sawyer, how can each service further improve their career and professional development programming to support earlier integration in a service member's career?
Senator, thank you for your comments, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that military service is a powerful way for Americans to set themselves apart while in service and beyond their service. As far as starting earlier, a number of the programs that we have that are aligned with but not specifically associated with transition, for example, the tuition assistance program, helps service members develop either earn degrees or develop credentials, certifications that will help them in their military service or beyond their military service. The other things that we do are helping service members to translate the work that they do into what could be a civilian career when they decide to transition. And that's through our credentialing program. We help service members achieve credentials, and we also help them translate the work that they do through their MOS into career opportunities, understanding where they can apply those credentials.
And Mr. Sawyer, what else in the remaining few seconds I have? How can Congress help you with this and improving this process?
Well, thank you for that. The continued oversight that you're giving, and I believe holding DOD and the agencies accountable for implementing the recommendations that we have given them on this area. Awareness, ensuring that service members are becoming aware is another area that could be helpful. And for the department, we have issued recommendations asking them to develop performance goals with these programs and evaluate those programs to ensure that objectives are being achieved.
Well, thank you both, and I think it's so important that we continue to get the message out that serving in the U.S. military is not putting your life on hold. Thank you.
Senator Sullivan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and gentlemen, thank you for being here. I think this is a really important hearing because we all know this is a win-win proposition for everybody. Employers, our country needs hard workers, our members of the military, their families, to be able to come off active duty and go into a good-paying job, and then to have a workforce where the men and women that you hire know what it's like to have discipline and get up at 05 or 04 or whatever and be on time. I mean, this is a win all over the place. So I want to ask a specific question. I had a provision that was in last year's NDAA that encouraged DOD to partner with local employers, local unions, the building trades in Alaska in particular hire a lot of members coming out of the military. And what I've seen is that a lot of times it's really base commander specific, meaning, hey, a base commander at J-Bear might be like, yeah, let's bring the unions and the employers on base. Our guys can start doing transition stuff early before, one day before they get out. And then you have a new commander and all that goes away. So what my NDAA provision was to try to get DOD to focus on kind of from a broad perspective, let's do that across the board. And can I get an update from any of you on where DOD has been with regard to working with these groups that hire? Like I said, local unions, a lot of them have a really good program. The IBEW, for example, has a really good program in Alaska. In contractors, in the construction trades. If you have an update on that, I'd love to hear about it, but you might recall this provision. And then I do want to, maybe I'll just ask the second question next. It follows up on Senator Kelly's question about credentialing. And the one area in particular that I think is really important is the maritime industry. You might remember President Trump signed an executive order that would make it easier for transitioning military members in the maritime space to waive licenses, in allowing their experience to count towards merchant mariner credentialing and other credentials. But again, these are super well-trained, ready to go, and sometimes we make it hard. A lot of times we make it hard. So 2 questions, I'll throw it out to any and all the witnesses, but if you can take that first one first, and then the one on credentialing, following up on Senator Kelly's question. Thank you.
Senator, so we continue to work with employers and try and expand the engagement with employers to help transitioning veterans. So we continue to grow the Skill Bridge program.
Yeah, the Skill Bridge program is great, by the way, and I think you think it's going well?
Senator, we do believe it's going well. We had over 22,000 participants in the Skill Bridge program last year.
Great.
A high percentage of those participants convert to full-time employee with their Skill Bridge internship. We're replicating that program for military spouses with a Military Spouse Career Accelerator program, providing them with a 12-week fellowship so that they can gain that. And we're seeing an 80% conversion there as well.
Do you agree with me it's a little bit base commander dependent, and we could do a better job of kind of making sure everybody is on board with this? Or is that just something I'm seeing back home in Alaska?
Senator, I do believe that there are areas of the country where, particularly for service members who want to stay in the place, they want to retire from the location that they're in, that we can probably do a better job engaging at the local level and local employers. And so, Senator, that's something that I'll take back. I'd love to work with you and your team to figure out how do we drive more local engagement across the enterprise with consistency.
Yeah, that's really important. That's what my NDAA provision from last year was about. And then real quick on credentialing, anyone who wants to take that one on. I know it's a big topic, but it's got so much promise.
Senator, there, we continue to focus on our credentialing program. We provide a tool that will allow service members to gain their credential, and a tool also as well to figure out how to
when they're
translate
still on active duty?
While they're still on active duty, to earn their credentials. And then we engage with the Department of Labor through the U.S. Military Apprenticeship Program, and service members can gain a Department of Labor Journeyman Certificate. And we have over 93,000 participants in that program. Mr. Rodriguez may want to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Rosbrani. Senator, I just wanted to add that I spent a week in Alaska, and I visited the commanders at J-Bear. If you recall, during my confirmation hearing, he asked me to go to Alaska, so we spent a week there.
Thank you.
I met with the commanders. They said exactly what you did. They wanted connections to the local community. We had our state director come. We actually went to American Job Center there at the local level to ensure that they were connected. And we spoke to the electric workers union out there, IBEW. I visited them as well.
Good.
So there's a strong relationship at the local community with the commanders, but as you mentioned, that often changes when the commander does have a change of command. But the resources are there at the local levels. We have to ensure that they understand that those resources exist and make sure that we are continually connect with the incoming commanders as well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Blumenthal.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As I go around the state of Connecticut, and I'm sure my colleagues have the same experience, what I find is, again and again, small and medium-sized businesses saying to me, we need people with skills, particularly in manufacturing. Every year, I guess the estimate is 200,000 service members transition back to civilian life. That is a potential pool of skilled labor that right now, I'm guessing, is only partially used for manufacturing, particularly by those small and medium-sized businesses. A government accountability office released a January 2023 report that urged the VA to collaborate with veteran service organizations in identifying outreach gaps. The combination of VSOs and small businesses, I think, offer a real opportunity for apprenticeship, on-the-job training, perhaps even skills provided while on active duty in anticipation of potential jobs outside. The military is one of the great educational forces, if not the greatest, in America today in terms of its resources and the numbers of people that it involves. So I'd like to ask this panel what your ideas are for enhancing the skill training and job placement in manufacturing or small, medium-sized businesses around the country.
Sure. Senator, I'll take this question first. I just visited an advanced manufacturing company, Rockwell Technologies in Wisconsin, and their premise was they cannot hire enough veterans. They want to get more veterans into advanced manufacturing. So they're working across the veteran community to make sure that they are aware of these type of resources exist for training. Apprenticeship programs we know are extremely valuable. $80,000 starting salary when someone completes an apprenticeship program and a 90% higher rate post-apprenticeship. So through our regional veteran employment coordinators located across the entire country, we're connecting corporations and veterans across the entire country to these type of opportunities. And we do this in conjunction with the SkillBridge program as they're working on SkillBridge when they do get the opportunity to participate in DOD. For those who don't get to participate in it, we have opportunities that we are working to solidify with companies across the entire country. Also, as part of Task Force Movement, which I sit on that organization's structure there, we're looking at, again, how do we align manufacturing organizations to locate this talent and make sure that they are connected with these opportunities that exist.
And Senator, I would add as well, in partnership with the Department of Labor and Department of Defense, we send a weekly email called Vet Resources to about 14 million subscribers, veterans and their families across the country. That includes links to jobs that are routinely updated, sometimes daily, when we connect with the corporate sector, the commercial sector, to cull these jobs. And more importantly, I think the jointness that we continue to share these resources with our veterans and their families through that channel and many others is a great way to connect the dots between the commercial sector and our veterans.
Senator, the other thing I'll add is in the TAP program, in the tailored instruction in the two-day courses, there's a two-day course delivered by the Small Business Administration that can help the service members transitioning explore opportunities in small business, either as an entrepreneur or working in a small business.
Thank you all. Thank you for your service, and I hope perhaps the next panel will address this question as well, because I think the Veteran Service Organizations can play an important role in this challenge. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Tillis.
Thank you, Chair Tester, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. A couple of questions. I was in here earlier, and one thing that I'm curious about is to what extent does the TAP program emphasize and ensure that we get a connection with the VA upon separation?
Senator, so in the TAP program, one of the specific core courses is a session that's led by the VA.
Yeah, but I mean, we're leading them to water, but we know if you take a look at the number of suicides that occur on average, about 2/3 of the people who commit suicide every day are not connected to the VA. So I know that it's obviously a natural transition because it's a discussion about benefits and everything else, but to what extent does the TAP program remain focused on not only leading them to water, but actually enrolling and become connected? And I'd be also curious, Mr. Sawyer, if you have any observations on that.
Senator, I'll comment just briefly on the particular piece that you mentioned about suicide and suicide prevention. So through that transition process, we conduct a mental health assessment. There's also we're working on this single health assessment with the VA, so that if we identify that a service member may be at risk or has been treated for mental health, then they are referred into the in-transition program, and then that information is shared with VA. So we start that process early, and we're very focused on ensuring that there's continuity of care so that in that transition period, the 365 days
Okay.
following.
Mr. Jacobs, you have anything to add? I'm going to go fast. I got one other point I want to make related to.
We think there's a moral imperative to connect veterans to their earned benefits and health care, because it's exactly to your point. When veterans utilize their earned benefits and health care, they do better. And it's not only in terms of reduced suicide rates, but it's better health outcomes, better economic opportunities. So we have a one-day TAP course. One of the ways that we're enhancing it is by including our VSO, accredited VSO and State Department of Veterans Affairs partners. And that's important because, you know, this is 200 pages of information about VA benefits and healthcare. It's a lot to digest in one day.
And most people aren't going to.
They're going to come back with more questions, and our VSO partners and state partners can help them as one more
Okay,
factor.
Mr. Starr, you got something to add briefly?
Thank you. I would just like to add that GAO does have ongoing work that's looking at the mental health and suicide prevention for transitioning members, as well as the warm handover process, and we would love to meet with
Well,
you.
I'm going to make sure I stay within my time, but I do want to go back to something that Chair Reed mentioned about the electronic health record. I've been following, I was on Senate Armed Services till last Congress, following the electronic health record implementation, DOD. Good on you all for getting it done. We've got to get it done in the VA. It's a long way from being done. Until those two platforms are completely implemented, we probably need some duct tape and baling wire to get data that we can use to better predict what we should be trying. I've said in this committee before, it will be great when we have a TAP audience of one. We're not there yet. But one of the ways that we can get that is through predictive analytics. And one thing that came to my mind is whether or not we should take a look at information that we had in the electronic health record for the service member and see if we could use predictive analytics to say that this person could be in crisis, and sadly correlate that, using historic records, sadly probably correlate that to this veterans population who's committed suicide. And then if you start thinking, if there is a statistical correlation there, then this should begin to be something that's very, very much embedded in future TAP programs. Time's expired. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis. And on behalf of Senator Testa, let me recognize Senator Hirono.
I thank both chairs for this hearing as I sit on both committees. This is for Secretary Vazirani and Secretary Jacobs. Since I have both of you here, there is a huge issue on Oahu in which veterans are having difficulty accessing critical healthcare services at the Matsunaga CBOC, which is located at Tripler Army Medical Center. Can you both look into what DOD and VA can do to make it easier for veterans to get on base for care and report back to the committees and my staff? I think this should be, I hope, a pretty easy fix, because what's happening is when our veterans try to get on base, they have their VA card, VA ID cards, and apparently that is not adequate to get on base, and they're supposed to have a DOD compliant ID. So, can both of you figure this out and make it easier for veterans to get the care that they need from the Matsunaga CBOC?
Senator, we're certainly committed to taking care of people and beyond the transition point as well. We are working through the Joint Executive Council on access to bases for veterans. We're working through a common ID to develop a common ID that can be utilized, and I certainly commit to getting back to you on a solution for.
Why can't the VA? Why can't they just use their VA ID? Anyway, that's an idea, rather than requiring them to go get a whole another ID. Next question for Mr. Jacobs. Regarding the Solid Start program, does VA track during which stage of Solid Start veterans stop responding to outreach? The idea is at certain specific timeframes, the 200,000 veterans a year are supposed to be contacted within 90 days, 180 days, and 360 days. Do you keep data on when they stop responding? And I'd also like to know what are the questions that they are asked, because this program is supposed to be a check-in to help address concerns, connect the VA with resources. So do they get asked things like whether they've experienced sexual assault during their time in service, whether they exhibit suicide ideation? What kind of questions are asked of the VAs as you make these contacts?
Yeah. Thanks, Senator, for that question. So through our Solid Start program, we contact recently transitioned veterans at 3 points in the 1 year after they've left the military. It's usually around the 90, 180, and 365-day mark. In some cases, we can connect with those veterans quite easily. We send an email in advance making sure that they know, because many Americans don't answer calls from numbers they don't know about. We call at each increment 7 times, and so if we're not able to successfully contact them, we move on, but then we continue to try to contact. And the goal here is really personalized individual attention. So it's really focused on, one, making sure that if there's a mental health crisis, that we can help them. But 2, it's making sure that we're connecting them to the benefits and the care that they need, whether it's an update on their status, the status of
So I know what the purpose is of Solid Start, but is there a time frame in which the veterans stop responding to contacts? Within this 1 year time frame?
We've been able to connect with about 75 to 80% of veterans through the Solid Start, but I would have to get back to you with more specific data.
Isn't there a standard list of questions that the contactor is asking so that they can ascertain whether services need to be, so they can be connected with services? Can you send me those questions?
I would be happy to follow up, and we do also try to make sure that it's open-ended so that it's not overly prescriptive, but we can get back with some more detailed information.
Thank you. My time is running out, but I did have one question, Mr. Chairman, both chairs, if I can ask about SkillBridge.
For the record.
I think, shoot.
That's
You're not
okay.
going to let me ask the question?
I can't do it. We got another panel.
Okay, sorry about that. I will submit the question.
Senator Blackburn.
Amazing if I was the chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for being with us. I think we all have plenty of questions. I want to stay with that Solid Start program, Mr. Jacobs, if we can do that. So I want to be sure that I'm following you on this. The veterans are contacted by phone call 90, 180, and 365 days into the program. Is that accurate?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And then you confirmed that they have received a mental health evaluation in the last year of their service?
No.
No.
So
Okay.
the goal is to try to identify, I think the reason the program was stood up in 2019 was recognizing the first year post-transition is a high risk for some veterans.
Okay. So then I want to confirm that I heard this right too. So the VA, through the VA Solid Start program, the VA receives information that is shared from DOD to VA.
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And that is what you use to ascertain veterans that are eligible for these mental health services, right?
Yeah, so the
Okay.
department.
All right, let me move on then. So these veterans are deemed a priority, correct?
We do receive information for
Okay.
high priority.
So they are automatically enrolled in the VA system, and they have their profiles flagged for licensed professional mental health counselors so that they can start that dialogue. Is that accurate?
No, they're not automatically enrolled. They have to enroll at their own
They
discretion.
have to enroll. So what's the wait time to enroll?
I would have to get that for the record.
Okay, let's submit that in writing. Now, one of the things of interest to me is if you've got all this data and you're transferring it from DOD to VA, why would an individual have to wait weeks to get their information? I've got several veterans that are part of our team back in Tennessee and here in DC. And it makes no sense that one of our team members had to wait 14 weeks to get their medical documents from the DOD and then had to wait for VA to schedule appointments. So if you're doing it for one sector, it seems like you could kind of clean up the system and do it across the board.
Senator, I'd like to get the information on the individual team member so that we can personally address
Well,
that.
I think writ
But
large,
also-
just the fact that
correct.
people have to wait so long to get their information, then they've got to wait again.
Yeah.
And to get an appointment.
Going to the TAP program, we've had a lot of fun looking at this with you all and the TAP program. I had some comments that I'm going to take my time to read. These come from different members of our team. I would like to note that TAP, let's see, he wished he went back to take advantage of the program more and appreciated the classes offered, but he had managed a $180 million budget and felt like this program was one size fits all, and he had to go back and take a class on budget. So these need to be personalized more. Here's some more comments. Some of the contractors that work there have never successfully transitioned themselves. The contractor teaching my class how to get a D, C, and V suite job in the corporate world, he was a retired E6 that got his job teaching our class right out of his retirement, so he had no experience. Wasting days teaching me, a 20-year veteran, how to do a simple budget, handing me a VA book and telling me all I need to know is in there. Holding job fairs every Wednesday that consist of a truck driver, LEO, or assembly line position. Resumes produced that are not just lukewarm, they're not helpful. So I think that if we're going to put the money into this, then we need to see some personalization. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator King.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those of us who are on both committees get twice the time. Is that correct?
Divided by 2.
Yeah, I see. Thank you. I figured. I did want to mention, there was some talk earlier about spouse employment, and Senator Sinema, Langford, myself, and Senator Fisher got a bill passed in the Senate about a month ago requiring the federal government to allow remote working for military spouses at any government agency. So that's a step forward. We need to get it through the further process, but it has been passed by the Senate. How much of this is legislation and how much is implementation? One of my life mottos is implementation is as important as vision. And it sounds like what we're really talking about today is implementation. And do you need new authorities? Do you come to us with recommendations for any changes to the law, additional funding or additional resources? Mr. Vazirani, do you need anything further from us, or do you have the authorities you need and it's just a question of working the system?
Senator, thank you for that and the opportunity to express. One of the things I think we found is that the work through the Joint Executive Council has really helped in this collaboration and in taking the authorities that you provided us and implementing them.
I like the idea of the Joint Executive Council. By the way, does the Joint Executive Council ever meet with veterans and veterans service organizations, have focus groups, polling, and just input from your customers?
Senator, the working committees do have those kinds of engagements, and we do have them at the Joint Executive Council as well. We do bring people in to talk through ideas, so we continue to work that. I think through that interagency process, we've worked through it, and we're understanding where we may have difficulties or barriers. And Senator, as we do that, we appreciate the opportunity to come back to you and let you know if we do need additional authorities.
I hope you will, and I hope all of you will take advantage of my invitation to suggest any changes in authorities, any federal statutes that are obstacles to the implementation. Here's a question that occurs to me. We're talking about TAP, which I understand is a mandatory program. What would the base commander do if a soldier skipped a mandatory weapons safety class? My suspicion is he or she would make sure they got to that class. Is this, again, an implementation at the base commander level?
Senator, we continue to work through that and ensuring that the commanders who have the responsibility to balance the mission readiness along with care for the service member. And that's why we have the commander engaged at that 90-day point for that capstone to review how the service member is engaging. And as Mr. Bursla has indicated, we're creating that dashboard so that a commander can track how a service member.
Something seriously wrong if 70% don't meet the one-year guideline. I mean,
that's a serious problem, and it seems to me that's an accountability problem. So I hope that's a priority. We talked about credentialing. Isn't one of the issues with credentialing state laws, and to what extent are we able to work with states and state compacts? So if you learn to be a plumber or electrician in the military, you don't have to go out and spend a year going through a state process to get a license to be a plumber or electrician. Mr. Labor, about what's your view of that one?
Dr. Osh was going to say so. I apologize there. Senator, one of the things that was passed in 2021, that there was an ability for states to have reciprocity agreements with regards to accepting those licenses and credentials.
And is that happening? That's my question.
That's one of the things we're working on with the states. We're trying to ensure that they understand, one, that that agreement exists, but also for the military spouses to be educated about that as well as the Department of Defense's legal departments, to ensure that they can provide support to those military spouses to have conversations with the state departments.
I think that would be a place where some emphasis should be placed to work with the states, press the states, because all the states talk about helping veterans. This is one clear way they can do it. I'm out of time, but one additional issue that has come up in other hearings we've had is financial counseling that's necessary for many veterans because they're suddenly out into the Wild West of civilian life, and so financial counseling is something that's important. Thank you all. And a hearing like this always focuses on the negative, on what's not being done. You all are doing a lot, and I just want you to know that we appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So here's what's going to happen, because nature is calling some. We're going to take about a 5-minute break for the panelists. Be back. I'm sorry to do that to you guys, but you know how it is. And then get back. We'll finish up, and then we'll go to the second panel. So, and you can go vote right now if you want. Okay? So we are adjourned for 5 minutes, and it will be 5 minutes. If nobody else shows up, we got about another 12 minutes, and then we'll get to the second panel. You're good with those, Senator Budd?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and again, thank you all for the panel for being here today. Mr. Bursler, North Carolina has taken great efforts to integrate veteran communities. It's something we hold dear, and it's very important to us in North Carolina. Here's some examples. NC Serve launched in 2015 and was the nation's first statewide coordinated network for veterans and military families. And North Carolina communities were some of the first to adopt the Community Veterans Engagement Board structure in 2016, with 7 of those CVEBs now locally led by nonprofit leaders and working very closely with the Department of Veterans Affairs. North Carolina leaders are also part of Mission 85. It's a 3-state effort in North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia to align local, state, and federal and nonprofit resources to improve the quality and continuity of care for veterans along Interstate 85 in North Carolina. You're familiar with those efforts?
Yes, Senator, very familiar. Thank you.
Great. It seems like we're leading the country in efforts to improve veteran reintegration. So, that being the case, how would you like to see this model? It sounds like you're familiar with. How would you like to see this utilized in other states?
Well, thank you very much, Senator. I think with the leadership of the Veterans Bridge Home in particular that helps steward the NC Serves initiative you mentioned, they are a critical part of our Vet Resources Community Network, which is a nationwide community of practice that shares these lessons from North Carolina with other states that want to align with a lot of the objectives that they've set out. And CVEBs, Community Veteran Engagement Boards, as you mentioned, are still fantastic listening posts and observation posts for us out in the field that can relay customer and employee experiences directly to the facilities that are in their backyards, but also VA Central Office. So they're incredibly essential. They're the conduit between that installation and that return home to the community. And we are glad to partner with not only these partners, but also our state departments of Veterans Affairs who are in tandem.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Veserani, in your written statement, you state often, and I quote this, often military spouses find the transition of their service member an ideal time to begin, restart, or re-energize their career. So unfortunately, that's also a statement about lack of employment opportunities while their spouse is in service. So would you agree that through the department, they should work to improve spouse employment opportunities, not just in transition, but also during service?
Senator, we firmly believe that military spouse employment is critical to successful service of the service member and to a successful transition. So we're working very hard across the interagency, also with states, to ensure that military spouses have employment opportunities. We also work with our corporate and nonprofit partners to ensure that there are good career opportunities for military spouses.
Thank you. So what's the department doing to improve spousal employment opportunities, particularly when a military family relocates during the transition back to civilian life?
Senator, so through our military spouse employment program, there's a specific aspect through the transition period called MyStep, which helps a military spouse through that transition process, finding new opportunities. One of the new programs that we have is called the Military Spouse Career Accelerator Program. So it's a SkillBridge-like program. So we engage with corporate nonprofit partners, provide a 12-week fellowship for a military spouse. They gain employment experience, and we're seeing that we're having a very high conversion rate of those spouses into full-time employment with their fellowship sponsor.
Make sure I'm not asking the same question. Can you talk specifically about DOD's Military Spouse Employment Partnership? I don't think that's the same one you were just referring to, unless it is.
So they're slightly different programs. Okay. The Military Spouse Employment Partnership is where we engage with employers to actually to bring on full-time hires. And we continue to grow that program. In fact, we're inducting today 130 new partners into our Military Spouse Employment Partnership program.
So this Military Spouse Employment Partnership, the MSEP, what are current limitations to the program, if any?
I think the current limitations is just expanding our reach and helping employers to understand the benefits of employing military spouses. We know that military spouses are, in many cases, significantly more qualified than their civilian counterparts. They have higher levels of education. We also know through that military experience, they develop a level of resilience and a level of ingenuity that proves them to be very successful employees.
Thank you. Time has expired.
Senator Budd, appreciate you and Senator Rosen's patience. Senator Rosen.
And thank you, Chairman Tester. It's a really important hearing. You know, our servicemen, how we care for them as they transition, it really makes a difference. I want to agree with Senator King that streamlining and implementation is always key to success. Reducing the, the paperwork is always the most stressful thing for people. So I want to talk about a reserve and guard demobilization. So Secretary Vazirani and Secretary Rodriguez, these are for you. I'm concerned with the demobilization process for guard and reserve service members transitioning from active duty orders back to reserve status. The reserve component, they're required to complete the TAP program even though they're not separating from the military. TAP curriculum, it's tailored to individuals separating from military service entirely rather than returning to reserve status in their civilian applications. So instead of receiving help completing travel vouchers and reimbursements for costs incurred during their mobilization and deployment, reservists are forced to take classes tailored to those leaving the military and starting new lives as civilians. We've heard a lot about this from our reserve men and women in Nevada. So as such, they must figure out the burdensome, let me tell you, burdensome reimbursement process on their own, and the reserve components just face their own direct set of challenges as they lack access to day-to-day services available to either active duty troops because they're not at their 28 unit days of the month to be able to sit down with someone for help. So I get language in the FY24 Senate NDAA that encourages DOD to modify the demobilization process for the reserve component to better address their needs and circumstances, and this requires a committee be briefed on actions taken to improve this process. So for both of the secretaries, Vazirani and Rodriguez, how would you improve this reserve components part, so it better focuses on what they actually need. Particularly, this is a huge stressor, this financial stressor that they can't figure out how to get their reimbursements, their travel vouchers. They're not getting out of the military. We need to help them so they can continue their service. Please.
Senator, I think an area that we can help that reserve component member make that transition, and to your point, they're not transitioning from the military. They're transitioning from their active service to back to their reserve unit and to their, so one of the things that we will continue to do, and we're doing this through the interagency partnership, is how do we assess the needs of an individual coming into the TAP program and continuing to evolve the TAP program. And so an area here to support the reserve component, those members, is an area that we recognize we should continue to evolve, and we appreciate the support that you're providing on that.
Thank you. We'd love to see some reporting on how you're doing that. Please, Mr. Secretary.
Senator, that is a great question with regards to the Guard reservists, because they have unique requirements in their process of transitioning as well. One of the things we've done is we executed an off-base transition training pilot that began last year, and that's allowing us to be at the local communities working with the Guard reserves that allow us to work through their individual needs when it comes to preparing for transition and or when they're looking for a job to maintain while they're actually performing Guard reserve work. One of the things that we've seen so far in the TAP sites is that there's currently at 10 states, over 7,000 service members have been supported through the current pilots. And we want to ensure that they also understand that if we are able to in the future utilize the American Job Centers to support Guard and Reserve, that would be another requirement or another resource, I'm sorry, that would allow those Guard and Reserve members to utilize at the state and local levels.
All right, thank you. I am going to let the second panel, we really appreciate you, and there you go, Chairman.
Well,
both chairmen.
Finally came along. You should have come to the panel earlier, and we could have finished this up a lot quicker, Senator Rosen. I want to thank the first panel. Needless to say, thank you for the work you do, and also needless to say, we have more work to do. So thank you all for that, and you are dismissed. And we'll start on the second panel. So I'm going to welcome the witnesses to the second panel, and I'm going to apologize up front. Obviously, this is a big issue by the presence of so many members, which is a good thing. The bad thing is that I wish we could spend more time with you, the second panel. And on this second panel, we have Ryan Gallucci, Executive Director of the VFW, Veterans of Foreign Wars. We also have Tom Porter, Vice President of Government Affairs for Blue Star Families. We have Kevin O'Neill, who is the Employment and Education Policy Associate for the American Legion. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Arthur DeGroat, somebody who has been in front of the VA committee before. He is Executive Director of the Office of Military and Veterans Affairs at Kansas State University. And as soon as you get seated and you're ready to go,
Can I do a quick?
I'm going to turn to Chairman Reed for a comment.
First of all, welcome all of you, but we're going to particularly welcome Ryan Gallucci, who is a Rhode Islander and a graduate of the University of Rhode Island. And thank you for your service in the military and now at VFW. So go Rhodey. Thank you.
And Mr. Gallucci, you have the floor. 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Reed, Ranking Members Moran, Wicker, and members of the committees. Thank you for the opportunity to provide VFW's remarks on this vital topic. Nearly 200,000 service members exit the force each year, which makes regular joint oversight hearings like this an imperative for today's military. A solid transition can set up veterans for success after service. Conversely, a failed transition could lead to devastating consequences like unemployment, homelessness, even suicide. The perception of veterans after service directly correlates to the next generation's propensity to serve. Failed transitions hurt military recruiting, making this a national security priority. The VFW is on the ground every day at more than 20 military installations worldwide, working with nearly 20,000 transitioning service members, or approximately 10% of the transitioning force every year. Accredited by VA, our professional staff assist troops with benefits delivery at discharge, or BDD claims, provide benefits guidance, and even provide VA benefits briefings when offered the opportunity. Last year, VFW filed more than 12,000 claims for transitioning service members, ensuring timely connections to benefits like VA compensation and care. We speak today not only as veterans who have gone through TAP, but as professionals who work in TAP every day. The VFW testified on TAP before the House earlier this summer. At the time, we were frustrated by a lack of engagement from VA. Thankfully, our collaboration with VA has substantially evolved. The VFW is the only organization that participated in multiple TAP 6.0 pilots. We provided feedback on the 5.1 curriculum and are now collaborating on ways to ensure TAP participants have access to competent, accredited representation where practical. This is why the VFW highly recommends the passage of the TAP Promotion Act. We know the immense value for all troops to access accredited representatives. VA has committed to making this a reality. By codifying this collaboration, we ensure that more service members have access to critical information and resources prior to separation. Sadly, many are not offered the opportunity to even use this program because they cannot attend TAP on time. Timely attendance in TAP is critical. Recently, a member of Chairman Tester's own staff contacted VFW to file a BDD claim. When the VFW spoke to this staff member, we learned they had just 1 day to spare before they were ineligible. In a stroke of luck, they had their records available, and the VFW was able to file before the hours-long window closed. Had they waited even 1 day, they would have missed an opportunity to apply for seamless care and benefits. This problem disproportionately affects junior enlisted and junior officers, who comprise most of the separating force. Veterans Experience Office data indicate that this is a real problem, with most claimants reporting they file after the uniform comes off because they missed the BDD window entirely. VFW clients indicate that this may be a command-level problem, demanding command-level solutions, such as evaluating leaders on compliance. Connections to community resources are also a force multiplier that often means the difference between a successful or unsuccessful transition. The law was written to ensure community connections are made for all separating service members. Unfortunately, DOD has decided to make warm handoffs only for troops it determines require the most help. The law is clear, though. These connections are for everyone. We cannot feasibly contort the TAP curriculum to meet the unique needs of everyone leaving the military. This is where countless organizations that offer community-based services play a role. If troops are going to college, connect them to Student Veterans of America chapters. If they want tech careers in Texas, connect them to Vets in Tech. If they want to work on Wall Street, there's 4 Block. No one knows what challenges they'll actually face until the uniform finally comes off. This is why reliable community connections are so important. If no one knows these organizations exist, they'll not be able to help. We only prevent service members from slipping through the cracks if DOD makes the connections as required by law. Finally, the VFW knows that families often play a critical role in facilitating successful transitions, while the service member focuses on completing their service obligation. Spouse attendance in TAP is notoriously low, but these classrooms full of uniformed service members on base during the duty day may not be the most effective vehicle. The VFW is a strong proponent of Labor's off-base transition training program, which is why we recommend either integrating VA benefits into OBTT or testing an OBTT-like program around military installations focused on families. Look, we've come a long way since the VOW Act. Veterans unemployment is down. Knowledge of benefits is up. Innovations that we heard about earlier, like SkillBridge, Solid Start, Employer Navigator, and Partnership Program are available. But we still miss many of the transitioning service members who need these services the most. The VFW believes we have a key role to play in this, which is why we're grateful for the dialogue with your committees today. Chairman Tester and Reed, Ranking Members Moran and Wicker, this concludes my testimony, and I'm eager to answer any questions you or the committee members may have.
There will be questions. Thank you, Ryan. Mr. Porter, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman Tester, Chairman Reed, for having the hearing. Blue Star Families is the nation's largest grassroots military family support organization, and we're really at the heart of the issue that we're talking about here, transitions, here today. We're committed to connecting military and veteran families with their neighbors and organizations to create vibrant communities of mutual support. Our groundbreaking research is raising the nation's awareness of the unique challenges of military family life, both during and after service. Our innovative programs are solving specific challenges for our families, such as fighting economic insecurity with resources that foster spouse career development, address food insecurity, building family strength with family programming, and provide critical peer support for caregivers. With more than 275,000 members, including chapters and communities all over the world, Blue Star Families touches more than 1.5 million family members every year by cultivating innovative programs and partnerships, we seek to ensure that our military and veteran families always feel connected, supported, and empowered. Blue Star Families has 13 chapters across the country, which provide virtual and in-person support and local presence where various programs, events, and services are provided to military and veteran families to help them feel more welcome and engaged in the community. This past year, Craig Newmark, founder of Craigslist, committed $100 million to the support of veterans by contributing to solutions for the most pressing challenges facing veteran and military families, including mental health, suicide prevention, housing and homelessness, and food insecurity. As part of this generous contribution, he also made a personal commitment to Blue Star Families to start 12 new outposts to assist military and veteran families. Our outposts will build upon our existing chapter structure, allow us to partner with local organizations to bring events, programs, and resources to even more veteran and military connected communities worldwide. Transitioning from uniform to civilian life is a critical period for service members and their families, which is why it's extremely important that TAP is a comprehensive, family-centered, and outcome-based program that's delivered well in advance to service members and their family members before leaving service. A 2022 GAO report said that over 90% of transitioning service members participated in TAP, but that nearly 25% of service members who needed maximum support didn't attend a mandatory two-day class. However, our 2021 survey told us that over half, 58% of veterans reported they did not attend TAP or any government-sponsored transition assistance programming. Furthermore, 41% of these veterans reported that they and their families disagreed that they were well prepared to successfully navigate the transition from military to civilian life. There are evaluation gaps in services and service members and dependents' accessibility to the services. It's a positive step that spouse employment has been incorporated into TAP. However, child-friendly courses also are key to ensure dependents' accessibility. Our perception is that there are actually few literal barriers to participation for military spouses. Instead, it seems that there's a culture of non-attendance among transitioning spouses that must be overcome. One of the biggest challenges that spouses indicate they face in our research has to do with mental health challenges, an impact that they have on integration into civilian society, marital issues, and several others. It's our understanding that TAP includes some classes about identifying PTSD and other mental health challenges, but not necessarily classes about how to manage these challenges and their consequences. Specifically, we believe that robust marital support programs will help these military spouses. So in addition to what we normally look at in terms of transitioning with the TAP program, a lot of discussion here, also important that we haven't had a lot of discussion about here today are some of the major programs that have recently been passed, the Honoring Our Pact Act. The VA has done an amazing job reaching out to the veteran and military and veteran community to encourage them to enroll in their new benefits. So over 600,000 cases of benefits have been approved in the last year. And it's an incredible amount. And those that get the disability benefits at the time following their separation, that could be an enormous benefit and help during that critical part of transition. Also, the honoring the John Scott Hannon Act that was passed a couple of years ago. Blue Star Families is a recipient of one of the Fox grants that were part of that bill that you passed, Senator Tester. We appreciate that. We're in our second year that we've received that grant. It's a significant grant. We've done a lot of good. We've got some solid feedback. And what we're doing with that money is we're training family members and friends and how to address veterans in this critical time of need. So great work on that. Thank you very much, and appreciate you having me here today.
Thank you, Tom. Mr. O'Neill, you have the floor.
Chairman Tester and Reed, Ranking Member Moran, on behalf of National Commander Daniel J. Seehafer and our 1.6 million dues-paying members, the American Legion thanks you for the opportunity to testify on military to civilian transition. My own transition journey began as I was driving down an unpaved road in Djibouti, Africa, with two of my fellow airmen. We were on our way to start our overnight shift, and I proposed the question, what do you plan to do when you separate? Neither knew. The uncertainty in their responses propelled me to start thinking about the path that I would take following my military career. After many nights alone on deployment and a great deal of time to think, I made the decision to go back to school. Upon separating from the Air Force, I enrolled at a community college and from there transitioned to a four-year university, where I earned my degree. I had finally achieved the goal that I set for myself 4 years prior. I went on to earn my graduate degree, and all of that has led me here with you today. While I'm incredibly proud of these accomplishments, I recognize that I was fortunate enough to have found my path well before my separation. This cannot be said for all service members, and I believe that this is why we are here today. TAP offers a plethora of information that service members can utilize to achieve success post-military service, but there are improvements that can be made. One improvement is seeing that service members begin TAP no later than 365 days prior to their anticipated separation. According to a GAO report released in December of 2022, 70% of service members are not completing TAP within the mandated timeframe. With over 200,000 service members separating annually, that equates to around 140,000 transitioning service members who may have less than a year to plan for their future. This is far too many service members who may find themselves unprepared for the transition to civilian life. In light of the information gathered in this study, the American Legion would like to offer a couple of suggestions to remedy this issue. First, we can look to the Veterans Affairs Military Life Cycle Modules, or MLC, as a best practice for providing vital information regarding the transition process. MLC modules comprise 14 comprehensive informational sessions that allow transitioning service members and their families to access the information provided through TAP at any time throughout their military service. It is a great tool that can be emulated by other federal agencies. For instance, DOL offers a program titled the Employment Navigator and Partnership Pilot. This program offers one-on-one career assistance to transitioning service members and their spouses at installations worldwide. It is an excellent opportunity for service members and their spouses to better prepare for civilian life by finding the right career. If DOL were to create online modules similar to those offered through the VA's MLC modules, service members and their spouses would have greater access to information that will prepare them for a successful career post-military service. In addition to allowing for greater access to the many opportunities available to transitioning service members and their families, we would like to see an application created that can be accessed at any time throughout one's military career. This app would comprise the modules offered through TAP, as well as the programs offered by DOL, DOD, and other executive branch agencies. Through interagency partnerships and the creation of a comprehensive military lifecycle app, we can ensure that service members and their families have unfettered access to information that will assist in transitioning to civilian life. Not only do we want service members and their spouses to be successful in their post-military endeavors, but we also want them to serve knowing that there are options for them when it comes time to separate or retire. This will allow service members to be successful both in their military career and post-military career, as it contributes to a sense of security that comes only from having a plan. Chairman Tester and Reed, Ranking Member Moran, the American Legion thanks you once again for allowing us to be here, and I welcome any questions you may have.
Thank you, Kevin, for your testimony. Next, we have Dr. Arthur DeGroot.
Chairman Tester and Reed, Ranking Members Moran and Wicker, and members of these committees, I, as a third-generation Army officer, am honored for this opportunity to address you today with my insights on the challenges of post-9/11 era veterans transition. As a combat veteran, a human science researcher, a professional practitioner of transition assistance through higher education at Kansas State University, and working with nonprofit veteran service organizations, professional consulting, and my own personal coaching with over 120 veterans from the ranks of specialist to four-star general, I believe that I have a unique and relevant perspective on contemporary veterans transition. This year marks my 39th year in public service to our nation's military, in and out of uniform, and for the last 18 years have worked extensively with our veterans transition effort, so I am deeply thankful to participate with you at this joint hearing today on a subject of my greatest personal interest. For opening remarks, I wish to share a brief statement of my strategic perspective on our transition challenge. The military separation system deployed at the inception of the all-volunteer force in the 1970s was adequate for many generations of military members departing their service. Societal, workforce, and generational dynamics of previous decades proved to offer more favorable conditions for effective transition for our Cold War and Gulf War I veterans than we face today. However, we see today that far too little research work was conducted then and now on the practice of exit transition. Thankfully, for 4 decades, this gap of an empirical basis needed to guide veteran separation went largely unnoticed due to the presence of a large allied military defense sector that absorbed up to 80% of transitioning veterans into employment after their service. As we entered the post-9/11 era where social, economic, generational, martial, and workforce conditions had changed in significant ways, we found our legacy separation systems ill-suited to effectively assist our new generation of service members and their families to reenter civil life in the workplace. Responding to this reality, we performed a process improvement approach to adapt our legacy separation system to a transition assistance model. Some key changes impacting modern transition include the changed nature of the workforce, a change from human resource development model to a talent acquisition model, dramatic changes to the very nature of work and the workplace, the economic necessity for dual working spouse families, and the increased awareness of the impacts of behavioral health care on human performance. From my research and practice, I believe that the sum totality of these societal and generational changes, compounded by a lack of an evidence-based approach to modern transition, were not adequately accounted for as we adapted our legacy military separation system to meet post-9/11 era transition assistance needs. While many process improvements were made reactively to our underperforming systems of today, I find some of these changes have been ineffective when being applied to our transition system, some of these being addressed today in this hearing. So today, we find our post-9/11 era veterans having a greater transition challenge than any other previous generation, and having to serve as pioneers as the first generation of veterans to face such a major cross-boundary career transition, and doing so while competing for entry with highly skilled incumbent civilian talent pool for careers in new industry sectors where our veterans have little to no direct relevant experience in. Adding complexity to this current reality, we are also asking our young service members to forge their post-military futures within a process started just 365 days before they exit. This is both daunting and unrealistic given what we know empirically about adults making these types of life changes. My deepest belief is that our current TAP program places too much life decision-making upon our existing service members too close to their departure, rendering a state of learned helplessness, where our service members' perceived and actual needs or lack preparation to transition questions their innate beliefs they can do so successfully. In my written testimony, I offered several recommendations aimed to overcome systematic challenges in our current efforts, including adapting from a one-stage simultaneous process to a more natural, evidence-based approach of three-stage process of transition that sequentially merges with our retention efforts that can prepare our service members and their families for staying or leaving in a time frame where essential resources and assets and planning can occur over time. This would require an institutional culture where transition is not viewed as a competitor to retention. Both are simply a natural aspect of caring for our service members over their life course. My written testimony also addresses the empirical realities of service members' human capital and economic entry cost to civilian life and work that needs to be addressed more realistically than we're doing today, as well as commenting on the phenomena that, as a result of learned helplessness, many transitioning service members place an over-reliance on VA financial disability entitlements, becoming a disincentive to do the hard work for self-sufficiency and independence. In conclusion, I appreciate this opportunity to help our military, VA, and others as we continue to work together to improve this vital capability to care for our service members and their families as they move successfully into civil society as proud, independent, and successful veterans. I'm also ready to share some insights on health and well-being impacts upon transition performance, as it was highlighted during the first panel. I look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
Dr. DeGroat, thank you for your testimony, as I thank all of you for your testimony. I'm just going to say one comment about you, Dr. DeGroat, because these other fellows are in front of the committee much more often than you are, but I really appreciate you thinking outside the box, and you do that very, very well, and I appreciate that. I want to ask to all of you, you guys heard the previous panel, you heard the transition programs that are there. There's a lot of things you could say, and you could eat up the next hour, each one of you. But if you were going to pick one thing that the Department of Defense could do better and that the VA could do better, what would it be? And I'll start with you, Mr. Galucci.
Thank you, Chairman Tester. So one thing that we believe VA can do better is the collaboration that we're already working on, and that is the integration of accredited representatives in the Transition Assistance Program, which is also supported by the TAP Promotion Act. The reason this is so important is because we know that the people who need this program the most are not linked to it. We also know that TAP can't be everything to everyone. It's supposed to provide a baseline of information to separating service members. That's where high-touch, vetted, accredited programs and resources like the VFW, our VSO peers, or state agencies play such a critical role. Some of the urgency of this are the predatory actors that Mr. Jacobs spoke to in the first hearing. We call them claim sharks. I want to share two stories. The first is Joe Ziegler, our accredited representative on Fort Wainwright in Alaska. The service members he meets with regularly wonder why they're getting solicitation emails and aggressive online ads from these companies looking to sign predatory contracts. The second is a gentleman who's sitting behind me from the state of Tennessee, Preston Stewart, VFW member, who his peers within the military service recommended one of these predatory companies to help him with his benefits. So our recommendation is to inject this into the military life cycle module so that leaders at all levels know what right looks like. There are aggressive predatory actors out there, but there's lots of free assistance, competent, highly trained assistance ready to help.
Tom?
Thank you, Chairman. I think that we'd really like them to be able to look at the TAP program through the lens of what the family members want. Maybe they're looking at it from a top-down perspective. What does not only the service member want in his or her transition to the civilian life, but what does the spouse want? What does the child want? And then deliver on that. In person, a lot of new possibilities have developed, opportunities with virtual TAP, but they really need to have the in-person, high-touch availability for these opportunities. And they need to be able to have these events when it's not just during working hours. They could be outside of working hours, because if a spouse has a job, if the service member is busy during the day, then there's less excuse for them not to be able to attend if it's outside of working hours. I can tell you that recently, former service member, just trying to get a hold of anybody to do anything on the military side outside of working hours, it's almost impossible. So they can do better on that. And then how better to acclimate to the civilian world, working in public-private partnerships to tell people what it's like on the outside and the skills that are necessary to make that transition. And then when you do all these things, to be able to tell everybody about it. Don't expect, I'd say that look at the way that the VA is doing with the PACT Act. If they can do 100 outreach events in a month's time and see the progress and the results that they're getting in terms of people enrolling in the VA at this point, then they can do this. DOD and VA can both do this in terms of talking to veterans and talking to the service members, their spouses, their family members about the possibilities of their training and their transitioning to new opportunities in the civilian world.
Okay, Kevin?
Thank you for the question. In reference to the VA, I think that they can do a better job in advertising their military life cycle modules. I think this is a very important resource. Currently, only 30,000 participants have utilized this resource in the past year. I think this could be greatly enhanced, and that comes with better advertisement and communication. Additionally, I don't think we need to see transition, retention, and recruitment in conflict. The Marine Corps has proven that these things can coincide and work effectively together with their Marine for Life program. The Marine Corps currently has the best retention and recruitment of all branches of the military.
Thank you for that. Dr. DeGroot?
I believe the DOD is the opportunity to make the greatest improvement to our TAP program, and particularly see the conflict between transition and retention. I think we saw when we had wounded warriors, we recognized that we weren't caring for them well during Iraq and Afghanistan, and so what we did is create warrior transition battalions and sort of recovery units, putting line units and line leaders in charge of their soldiers to help them get well. And I think we need to expand the role of the active duty leadership in units to start the conversations earlier with their service members to make sure that they're talking about the right things and that their responsibility, they are responsible for their soldiers if they choose to stay and re-enlist, or if they opt to transition back to civilian life.
Thank you, Paul. Senator Reed?
Well, in the spirit of bipartisanship, I'll yield to Senator Moran.
Senator Moran.
Senator Reed, thank you. First of all, let me compliment Mr. O'Neill. I appreciated your story about how you've lived your life and how you thought about and the success that you've had since service. And I thank you for your service, and I wish you well in all the endeavors that now follow it. And you captured me with kind of the personal nature of what you've experienced. And Mr. Porter, you mentioned Fox grants. That captured my attention too. I think it's one of the significant components of the John Q. Hannon Act. And I rarely run into anyone or any community or any organization that knows or is utilizing them. And I'm not absent community leaders, and I'm not absent veterans. I'm anxious to hear your story about that grant in the 2 or 3 sentences that you can tell me, and maybe we can follow up more.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Senator. So we're in our second year, Blue Star Families, with the Fox grant, $750,000 first year, and it was recently approved for the next year. And so what we do, we focus it on equipping family and friends on the training and the skill sets that they need to be able to talk to that veteran or service member during that critical time to get the help that they need, which is, as we all know, it's a very, very sensitive time. So it's an 8-week training. Our program is called Upstream Solutions to Crisis, and that is within Blue Star Families. And we've so far completed 7 cohorts of a total of 50 participants. So it's very in-depth training. And so we're very proud of that, and we're going to be looking forward to doing more.
Is this occurring across the country with Blue Star Families in a particular community taking the lead, or this is something that you do nationally?
It's across the country, nationally it is. We hope to expand it.
And does that mean utilizing technology to deliver that conversation, those services?
Sure, and in person, right.
And in person, okay. Thank you. Dr. Grote, welcome back. I was reminded by your presence that the last time you were with us, Chairman Tester called you hot, white, smart, and thank you for improving his image of Kansans by your presence today. In your testimony, you say, and I quote, "Societal and generational changes were not adequately accounted for as we adopted our legacy military separation system to meet current post-9/11 era transition demands." You mentioned this in your response to Senator Tester's question. I wanted to give you, at least for my benefit, tell me more. You've done a lot of research into military life cycle and touch points in military career leading up to separation. What should we know to take from that sentence?
I think societally, this is a different. Let me go back. We tend to see veterans as this monolithic archetype from generation to generation, but there are significant generational differences between each generation of veterans. Yet we continue to just mildly improve on some existing legacy systems as we manage them in all different processes of talent management. But I think we have to recognize that generationally these are different people. The nature of their war experience. I went to war one time in 23 years for 7 months. Young veterans in 3 years have gone back and forth to wars in 2 different theaters or 3 different theaters in 4 years. The iteration of how we utilize soldiers today has an incredibly increased psychological demands. This is the first generation that went to war where they're present on the battlefield and the home front because of the presence of social media and communication technologies. The cognitive, mental, and moral demands on the current generation of our service members, they're still managing their homes while they're managing their soldiers on the battlefield concurrently. So, and then the nature of the workforce. We had an economy and industries where small unit leadership, which is the majority of our combat soldiers, they have great experience in leading groups of diverse young people to do very, very complicated, dualistic, hazardous things. And historically, they made great supervisors in manufacturing and industry. But now we have knowledge workers and knowledge economies. And so I also believe strongly that one of our shortfalls and this generation is the reliance on looking at the MOS skill, the military occupational skill. Most service members take a ASVAB test, and it kind of boils down to from the whole range of choices of what they can do in the military, from what they were talented for and what their desire to do. And it says you can be a cook, a truck driver, or a fuel handler. So now, as we start a transition, we're saying, okay, let's just credential you in that and make you do one of those three things in civilian life. So I think the reality is our workforce today, our service members may have been snipers today, but they don't want to be snipers in the civilian world, even if they could. They're looking for a bold transition, a cross-boundary transition to a new industry and a new life where their soft skills as veterans are very relevant, but their innate military talent is not directly relevant. So those are just a few examples where generationally the workforce has changed, our soldiers and veterans have changed, and we have to have a transition program that's relevant, that places them within those realities. And my written testimony cites about 13 other areas specifically where we're missing the mark on being more relevant.
Dr. DeGroat, thank you. Chairman Reed, thank you for your leadership on the committee. Thank you for your leadership in the Army caucus with me, and thank you for bringing our two committees together for this important topic.
Thank you very much, Senator Moran. And gentlemen, thank you for your testimony. Mr. Gallucci, you mentioned these shakedown orders that are going after people as they retire. Have you been in contact or any of the organizations with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau? That organization has a dedicated section for the military.
Yes, Senator. As a matter of fact, my colleague who's with us today, Christina Keenan, had participated in a roundtable with CFPB on this last week. We're in regular contact. We're also working, Christina had worked with state attorneys general to pen a letter in support of reining in some of these companies.
Well, if you need any assistance, please contact me in my office directly. Mr. Porter, I was talking about the transition with respect to health care, and you see it from a very interesting perspective, the families. What's one or two things that we could do better in terms of transitioning active duty personnel into transition to civilian life, maintaining the best health care they can?
Right. I'm sorry. Are you talking about VA healthcare, or are you talking about just transitioning?
I'm just talking about transitioning because, you know, many families don't get VA, but they have some benefits, or they just need advice as to how to sign up for the best program for their family, both value and cost.
Right. As I was mentioning before, it's really important to look at this through the lens of not only the service member, but the spouse and the child. What are their needs? What are their school needs? What are their employment needs, their healthcare needs, their community needs? And to be able to fold in other outside partners, so public-private partnerships would be part of that could be able to give job training, transitioning advice into the civilian career world. So those are important things. But the main thing is look at this from the perspective of not just the top-down from what the commander thinks on the base, but what does the service member, spouse, and children need?
Well, thank you. And Mr. O'Neill, do you have any ideas in terms of this issue of medical transition? Because I think it's important.
Thank you for the question, sir. I do believe that, as I stated regarding the military life cycle modules, that resources can be better advertised and better communicated. And this should start day one in the service. From your first duty station, when you first in process, you should be aware of these opportunities. But having access to virtual online modules creates a sense of anonymity that I think is important to service members because, unfortunately, there is a stigma associated with mental health issues.
Thank you. And Dr. Grote, I think you've raised a fundamentally important topic, that is, there is a real desire within the military to retain personnel. And when you set up a system that sets up exit routes that are pretty clear now, that seems to have a tension with retention. And you've raised this issue. Any advice in terms of how do we blend those two together?
I think it's a perceived tension because soldiers, every soldier leaves. either by the end of their service tour or the end of a career or by sacrifice in combat or result or just by separation. So the fact that every soldier leaves and it means that transition is just another part of, it's the same thing as retention. It's the other side of retention. I think when you show it the soldier early on all of the challenges of leaving and all of the assets and opportunities of staying for a while longer, I think they make a more informed choice. I don't think the truth of the value of military service is a disincentive to stay. They joined for the right reason, so I really don't think in practice it's really a competitive thing, one or the other. I think actually it's the same thing. And given more opportunity to think about it early on, you're actually coaching the person. You made a great choice. You can stay here if you want, you and your family, or you can transition. And if you transition, here's to do what you want to do. These are the things you need to do between now and then. If you're ready for that, if you've saved money to start your own business, if you've got enough savings and plan and enough credentials to get the kind of compensation in your career, your future career that you need to support your family independently, health care, child care, then you're ready to go. But if you're not ready to go, then continue to stay in the service, serve honorably and usefully, and build those assets and resources needed while you're in your uniform, and prepare yourself for that eventual transition.
So the premise is that an individual has to be informed about the benefits of continued service, the values and all the external and as well as the cost, all those things. And then at the same time, they have to be made aware of what's available outside so they can make a better judgment. And do you feel very quickly, do you feel we're doing that now?
We're not doing that, but I think we can do that. Okay. I think it's just a culture change, and we have to really look at that and make sure commanders realize that's the right thing to do. It's not going to drive. It may improve retention, or delay transition until the service member is more prepared and their families are more prepared. But not having that conversation until the last year. Current model, it looks like transition is when retention fails.
One other quick question, which is basically a lot of personnel will make that decision, I'm going to re-enlist, and then 2 months before their expiration of their service, they suddenly throw up their hands, no, I'm getting out. And those are now counted in the statistics as, well, you didn't have the full year. I think we have to do something about that. I think they have to refine who falls into the category.
Yes, sir. My written testimony shows that transition in other industries is usually a 3-stage process. It starts with confronting the reality of eventually leaving. Then there's a stage of disengagement, which is pretty much what our TAP program is now. And then there's a period of resocialization that science says could be up to 3.5 to 7 years. So what we're doing is essentially compressing all 3 of those natural adult transition stages into one, 365, and there, as many testimony was made, we're asking young people to make life-changing decisions that affect the rest of the course of their life too late and not enough time to think through and build the assets needed to go to the next stage.
Thank you.
So I think simply that the opportunity is just use the existing military infrastructure that we use in retention counseling with unit line leaders who know those soldiers and families the best. Use them to start having the transition conversations with not feeling fearful that that's going to encourage them out. And in fact, those conversations of showing the alternatives and the options, which would suggest you're probably not ready after 4 years to take yourself and your 3 children as a junior enlisted person with very little direct transferable workplace skills. You ought to stay in a little longer, become a non-commissioned officer, get some leadership skills, get some more courses while you're here. Maybe it's time for your spouse to get ready before you get out, because then you'll be a dual working family.
Thank you very much. I want to thank all the witnesses. Do you have another comment?
I'd ask a question if you'd let me.
I will let you ask the question, but it has to be succinct, and the answer has to be even more succinct.
Dr. DeGroat, please don't get me in trouble with, it won't be my fault, it'd be your fault if I'm in trouble with Chairman Reed. You said something, and I was writing it as quickly as I could, and it had something to do with VA benefits. You said at the end of your testimony, and what I wrote was that it has a consequence in creating less motivation to pursue other options. Would you tell me what you were conveying?
From working with a lot, let me make this very concise. I believe the frustrations that young people have when they're separating with the transition program, they then start over-relying on seeking higher levels of disability as a financial cushion, and that becomes a disincentive where they're spending all their efforts in transition on working the disability claim and ratings at the expense of working on independence and reliance for transitioning.
Is there any suggestion in that answer that the VA needs to emphasize more educational benefits, workforce training benefits, or is this just that people have this expectation of monetary benefits upon their departure?
I think if the DOD transition program, in the DOD, if the transition program is more effective, as we talked about today with some of these changes, then that problem will solve itself. But I think the lack of ability, the perceived lack of transitioning well through the DOD TAP program is causing an over-reliance and an overburden on the VA for disability to be the sole source of their plan for transition.
Thank you.
The last word has to be given by two Rhode Islanders. So, Mr. Gallucci, please go.
Thank you, Chairman Reed. I wanted just to take a second to respond to Ranking Member Moran's comments and Dr. Grote's comments as well. I fundamentally disagree that that's what's happening. Unfortunately, this is the system that's set up. What we see is that these benefits are often an enabler to economic readjustment and the like. I sit before you as a product of many VA programs. I'm service-connected. I utilize VA healthcare. I use the GI Bill. I use the VA home loan. Now, I believe that these have allowed me and people like me to thrive after military service against other factors. What I will also say there is one of the things that's missing in the TAP curriculum is that the primary mechanism for eligibility for VA care is that service-connected disability. There's other policy nuance here where insurance companies don't have to cover conditions that were a result of military service, and that is supposed to be covered by VA. If I were injured on my job with the VFW, I would be eligible for workers' compensation. I'm not eligible for that in the military. There's a reason that these benefits exist. I invite the dialogue with Dr. Grote and with the committee, but I don't want to understate the significance of separating service members applying for these earned benefits.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. I want to thank you for your testimony and also for your service to the nation, your continued service to the nation. I appreciate it deeply. We will keep the record open for a week, and the hearing is adjourned.